Hello and welcome guys. Honestly, I didn't expect we would be back here so soon with this continuation. Well, here we are anyway. Make yourselves comfortable and enjoy. This is Necromancer of the Shadows, chapter 626. Enter the dungeon. Evan raised an eyebrow hearing Asher and fell into deep thought. Since he is in a weakened condition because of creating an ability bead, do you think you can beat him? Evan asked after thinking about it for a few seconds. I don't know, but the chances of my victory are not high. You are a rank 1 evolver, and you don't have the confidence to defeat that guy, but still you are advising me to head inside the dungeon. Evan said in a sarcastic voice. Do you want me to die that badly? Asher closed his mouth when he heard Evan and didn't dare to speak again. Evan ignored Asher and looked back at the dungeon portal. I have already killed Sarah who tried to harm me. In a way, I have already completed my revenge. So there is no point in taking unnecessary risk by going inside the dungeon. I can now use the Tower of Ascension and go to Utopia. This way, even if this essence clone comes out of the dungeon, it will not affect me, Evan thought inwardly with an uncertain look on his face. But if I leave here without solving this problem, I don't think anyone will be able to stop this essence clone. Once it comes out of the dungeon, he muttered and closed his eyes. Although it hasn't been long since he was transmigrated to Aurora World, he has experienced many things here, so it was hard for him to ignore the danger of the essence clone that could potentially kill everyone who is living in Aurora World. He sighed lightly after thinking about everything and opened his eyes. He looked at the blood mist that was being absorbed by the portal and made up his mind. The blood mist that was coming from the city was continuously reducing, because the sprite cuckoos were putting more and more people to sleep, and the blood demons were stopping most of the blood mist outside of the city. Evan estimated that with the current speed, it would take at least 1 day for the golden barrier to completely disappear. My shadow possession skill is still on cooldown, so I will enter the dungeon after its cooldown time ends, Evan said to himself, and backed away from the golden portal. He sat down on the ground and looked at his status window. I still have 9 hours before the cooldown time of the shadow possession ends, Evan muttered and took out an A+ rank core. After taking out the core, he started to refine it, sending its energy towards his prime core. In the 9 hours he had, Evan wanted to increase the rank of his prime core, so that it would be easier for him to fight against the essence clone who was inside the dungeon. Normal A+ rank hunters would take quite some time to refine an A+ rank core, but Evan didn't take even 1 minute to completely refine an A+ rank core. With my current refinement speed, it should not be a problem for me to reach S rank in the 9 hours, Evan said after refining the A+ rank core, and took out another one from his shadow storage. Time passed and soon 8 hours passed by. In these 8 hours, the blood mist that was coming from the central city reduced greatly. But Evan noticed that other than the direction of the central city, blood mist started to come from other directions as well. It was clear that the mental energy waves had already spread in a wide range of wilderness, and the monsters who came into contact with them started to kill each other. This should be enough, Evan said, and finished refining an A rank core. The moment Evan completely refined the core, a mana vortex started to form a few hundred meters above his head. Mana from the surroundings rushed towards the vortex, and in just a few seconds, the mana vortex size increased to 10 kilometers. A vast amount of mana erupted from the mana vortex, and all of the mana was absorbed by Evan's prime core. The process lasted for about 40 minutes. After 40 minutes, the mana vortex started to disappear, and Evan's prime core successfully reached S rank. Evan's physical and soul power increased greatly after his prime core reached S rank, and the aura around him was just a step weaker than Asher, who was a peak rank 1 core evolver. After increasing the rank of his prime core, Evan looked at his status window and noticed that just like always, he didn't receive any new skills after increasing the rank of his prime core. Although he did not receive any new skills, Evan was not disappointed because he had already expected this. He looked at the details of the growth link skill and noticed there was a change in the skill after his prime core advanced to S rank. Now, by using the second effect of the growth link skill, he could take 4 skills instead of 3 from his shadow undeads. At least there is something, Evan muttered and stood up from the ground after confirming other than the growth link skill. Nothing else had changed. He had already summoned back all of his shadow undeads who were destroyed by the red fire, and all of them were now inside his shadow storage. The cooldown time of the shadow possession skill finally ended, Evan said, and took a deep breath. He summoned Kazal and pointed towards the dungeon portal. This is the dungeon portal of the Inferno dungeon, right? Although Evan was sure that the portal in front of him belonged to Inferno dungeon, he still wanted to confirm it. Yes, master. After Kazal confirmed his guess, Evan did not say anything, and summoned Kazal back into his shadow storage. He looked around him for a moment after summoning Kazal back into his shadow storage, and after confirming that everything was fine, he finally took a step forward and stepped inside the golden barrier. The golden barrier that was made from the energy of the world law resisted for a moment when Evan tried to enter, but that resistance did not last long and soon disappeared under the third effect of his rule breaker title. Only the laws of the origin universe can affect you. Evan successfully passed through the golden barrier, but the moment he entered the barrier, he felt something and his body stiffened. Chapter 627. Evan took a step forward and passed through the golden barrier without any problem, because of the third effect of his title rule breaker. But the moment Evan entered the barrier, he felt something and his body stiffened. He slowly turned back and looked outside of the golden barrier. Don't F***K with me, Evan took a deep breath and said in a barely audible voice. What are you all doing outside? He asked, looking at all of his shadow undeads who were standing outside of the golden barrier. Hearing Evan, all of his shadow undeads looked at each other with confused looks on their faces. Master, weren't you the one who sent us out of the shadow storage? Elijah asked when she heard Evan. Damn it, don't tell me I can't bring my shadow undeads inside the dungeon. Evan jumped outside of the golden barrier and summoned them back inside his shadow storage. After summoning his shadow undeads back inside his shadow storage, he once again entered the golden barrier. But just like last time, the moment Evan entered the golden barrier, all of his shadow undeads were sent outside. What the hell is going on? Evan cursed under his breath and furrowed his eyebrows. It was the first time he had faced a situation like this. Due to his title rule breaker, he was always able to ignore the rules of the dungeon, and so were his shadow undeads, because in a way, they were all part of his skills. But this time for some reason, none of them were able to enter the dungeon with him. Is it because of this golden barrier? Evan thought inwardly and narrowed his eyes. He tried to bring his shadow undeads with him a few more times, but everything was useless. Without my shadow undeads, I won't even be able to use shadow possession skill, Evan thought, and went into deep thought, whether he should go inside the dungeon or not. The shadow possession skill was his strongest trump card. That could increase his power to a completely different level. But if he could not bring his shadow undeads inside the dungeon, he would not be able to use the shadow possession skill. Even though he had increased the rank of his prime core, he was not sure if he could defeat the essence clone who was inside the dungeon, without the help of his shadow undeads. He tried different methods to bring his shadow undeads inside the barrier, but they were all useless. He killed a few of his shadow undeads, and summoned them back after entering the golden barrier. But the moment he summoned them, all of them were sent outside of the golden barrier. Damn it, Evan scratched the back of his head in frustration, and did not know what to do. Without the help of my shadow undeads, I may not be able to defeat that essence clone, but it shouldn't be difficult for me to run away. If the **T hits the fan, Evan thought, and took a deep breath. When he was not able to bring his shadow undeads inside the barrier, he looked at his shadow undeads, and snorted like a dissatisfied kid before entering the golden barrier once again. Even without them, this young master can fight 1,000,000 rounds against that essence clone, Evan said inwardly to encourage himself, and stepped inside the dungeon portal. The surroundings around Evan changed the moment he stepped inside the portal, and he soon found himself standing in the middle of a devastated, scorched land. The sky was scarlet red, and red clouds that looked as if they were filled with magma were slowly moving all over. After entering the dungeon, Evan immediately spread his spiritual senses to see if there were any enemies nearby. Only after confirming that there was no one around him, Evan sighed in relief. After confirming that there was one around him, Evan tried to summon his shadow undeads to see if he could summon them now that he was inside the dungeon. But unfortunately, the result was the same as before, and he couldn't summon his shadow undeads. Since I can't summon them, I can only rely on myself, Evan muttered to himself, and slowly moved deeper inside the dungeon while carefully looking at his surroundings. Unlike the last time when Adam entered the dungeon, this time the space inside the dungeon was very big. When Adam entered the Inferno dungeon, the dungeon was merely 5 kilometers big, but the current space of the Inferno dungeon was far bigger than that time. With his current soul power, Evan could cover an area of 200 kilometers without any problem, by using his spiritual senses. But even by using his spiritual senses, he could not cover the current space inside the dungeon. I can't sense a single monster here, Evan muttered to himself when he found no monster within the range of his spiritual senses. Where should I search for that essence clone? The space inside the dungeon was huge, and Evan wasn't even sure which direction he should go to find the essence clone. Only if my shadow undeads were with me, Evan said in a regretful voice. Because if he could use his shadow undeads, he could have easily found the location of the essence clone with their help. Suddenly, an idea came into Evan's mind, and he looked at the exit portal of the dungeon. He came in front of the exit portal and scanned the energy around it. Got it. In just a few seconds, Evan found what he was looking for and his eyes lit up. The blood mist that came inside the portal is being absorbed by that essence clone. If I follow the traces of the blood energy, I will be able to find him without any problem, Evan said to himself, and immediately rushed deeper into the dungeon, following after the traces left behind by the blood energy. Evan did not encounter anything while following the traces of the blood energy, and soon 1 hour passed by. 1 hour after Evan started to follow the traces of the blood energy, he finally noticed something and stopped moving. So this where he is hiding, Evan muttered to himself as he looked at the giant blood dome in front of him. Chapter 628. Evan stopped some distance away from the giant blood dome, and tried to look inside it using his spiritual senses. But he was surprised when he found that his spiritual senses could not penetrate inside the blood dome. When his spiritual sense didn't work, Evan used the Hawk's Eye skill. But even by using the Hawk's Eye skill, he couldn't see anything. There is a strange force that is preventing me from seeing what is inside the dome, Evan muttered and slowly walked towards the blood dome. While moving towards the blood dome, he activated the Arcana Embrace skill, and created a barrier around him. In just a few minutes, Evan reached the front of the blood dome, and saw that a red mist that looked like miasma was covering the dome from the inside, and preventing anyone from seeing what was inside it. How did you get inside the dungeon? Just as Evan stopped in front of the blood dome, he heard a voice filled with curiosity. Evan's expression changed upon hearing the voice, because even though he was constantly using his spiritual senses to avoid any surprise attacks, he still could not determine the location of the person who had just spoken. Suddenly Evan noticed that the miasma covering the blood dome began to thin out, and in just a few seconds, most of the miasma covering the dome disappeared. Evan activated the temporal velocity skill seeing miasma was disappearing, so that he could immediately move away in case of danger. You don't need to act like this, Evan heard the same voice once again when he activated temporal velocity skill, and saw someone sitting in the middle of the blood dome. I have no intention of attacking you. I am just curious as to how you managed to get into this dungeon, despite restrictions of the world laws. Is he the essence clone? Evan thought inwardly when he saw a man sitting in the middle of the blood dome. The man had 2 black horns on top of his head, and his skin was slightly red. His 2 deep yellow eyes were fixed on Evan, and he was looking at him like he had just found something interesting. Wisps of blood energy were coming out from all over the blood dome, and were being absorbed by the man. This guy is dangerous, although the man didn't do anything. Just by looking at him, Evan could feel that the person in front of him was not simple. Don't you think it is inappropriate of you to ignore my question and stare at me like that? Evan came out of his thoughts upon hearing the man's voice once again, and took a deep breath. How should I address you? He asked after taking a deep breath. The man smiled when he heard Evan and shrugged his shoulders. I am just a clone, so I don't have a name, but you can call me Lord or Master. Evan nodded his head hearing the man, and took out a chair from his shadow storage. Since you don't have a name, I will just call you D.I*keyed. He sat down on the chair he had taken out and looked at the man with an indifferent look on his face. Kid, do you know what happened to the last person who had talked to me like this? The man asked Evan in a cold voice, and a powerful spiritual pressure filled the surroundings. When Evan felt the powerful spiritual pressure from the man's body, He couldn't help but tremble slightly. If this had happened before, he would not have been able to handle this level of spiritual pressure. But now that both of his cores were at S rank, Evan could handle this level of spiritual pressure without much problem. He closed his eyes for a second to adjust himself to the spiritual pressure, and when he opened them again, his expression became indifferent. Tell me, I have plenty of free time, so I might as well listen to what happened to the guy who talked to you like this last time, Evan said while resting his head on his palm. The man looked at Evan's indifferent face for a few seconds. Suddenly, the spiritual pressure that was filling the surroundings disappeared, and the man smiled slightly. You are not bad. Since you are done with your so-called menacing act, can we talk now? Evan ignored what the man said and asked in an indifferent voice. What do you want to talk about? First of all, what should I call you? You don't want me to call you D.I*Keyed, right? I don't have a name. But you can call me Clone because that's basically what I am. Alright Clone, you want to know how I got into this dungeon, and I also have some questions for you. Then how about this, Evan said. I will answer your question, and in return, you will have to answer my question. Sure, Clone nodded his head without any problem after hearing what Evan said. Since you are the guest here, you can ask the first question. Then I will not deny your goodwill, Evan said after listening to Clone. My question is simple. Were you the one who taught Sarah and the others the method of summoning demons, and told them to kill humans? Yeah, Clone didn't deny and said without any expression on his face. I put a lot of effort into them, but in the end they all turned out to be useless, because they never accomplished a single task perfectly. I see, Evan nodded his head hearing Clone, and didn't show much surprise. Now my turn, tell me, how did you enter the dungeon even though it is sealed by a law barrier? I have a skill that allows me to bypass all barriers. I simply used that skill and entered the dungeon, Evan said and leaned back in his chair. Are you kidding me? Clone said in a cold voice. That is a barrier made from the law energy of this world. There is no way you could bypass it just by using a skill. Law energy. Evan showed a confused expression hearing Clone. I don't know what the law energy you are talking about, but I really entered this dungeon by using my skill. Clone looked at Evan with narrowed eyes and tried to see if he could get anything from his expression. But even under Clone's narrowed eyes, Evan's expression didn't change. Is he telling the truth? Clone thought when he saw Evan's confused expression. Does this stupid bastard think I'm going to tell him about my title rule breaker? Evan sneered inwardly and maintained the same expression outside. After a few seconds, Clone stopped looking at Evan and nodded his head. What do you want to ask next? Evan's face turned serious when he heard Clone. What is your goal? He asked in a serious voice. From Sarah and others. I heard that you taught them the method of summoning demons, so that they could kill as many humans as possible, and can evolve into demons, after using the Tower of Ascension, but I know all of this is just pure bullshit. Tell me, what is your real goal? Quote. Clone shook his head hearing Evan. I don't know what you want to hear from me. But what Sarah and others told you is true. The reason I worked so hard was really because I wanted them to evolve into demons after using the Tower of Ascension. Look, you are answering my questions because there is something that you want to know from me, Evan said in a cold voice. But if you are not going to answer my question honestly, then you can forget about receiving any answer from me. You are saying I am lying? Clone asked with narrowed eyes. Do you have any proof that I am lying? Tower of Ascension, Evan said in the same cold voice. Clone's expressions changed a little when he heard Evan, and he looked at him with a surprised expression on his face. Seeing the surprised expression on Clone's face, Evan's lip curled upward in a disdainful smile. Do you need any other proof? Clone looked at Evan's disdainful smile for a few seconds, and shrugged his shoulders. Fine. I admit that I was deceiving those stupid humans, Clone said, and smiled lightly. Don't tell me you are going to take revenge for those humans. I don't care whether you were deceiving them or not. I just want to know what is your goal. Since you said Tower of Ascension, don't you know what my goal is? Clone asked in a curious voice hearing Evan. I have a guess, but I want to hear the truth from you. Well, I don't know what your guess is. But yeah, my goal was the Tower of Ascension, Clone said, and looked at Evan. Do you know what happens when a S-ranker uses the Tower of Ascension? Their core will evolve to the next level, and their mana will turn into world essence, Evan replied when he heard Clone. You are right, their core will evolve, and their mana will turn into world essence once an S ranker uses the Toe of Ascension. In other words, they will become a rank 1 core evolver. But Clone said and smiled lightly. This benefit is available only for the people of the lower worlds. There is no Tower of Ascension in Utopia, so how do you think the S rankers of Utopia raise their ranks? So my guess was right? Huh? Evan muttered in a low voice, and continued to hear what Clone was saying. In order to become rank 1 core evolver, the S rankers of Utopia have to work hard for years to turn their mana into world essence, and have to take a pill named Source Pill to evolve their core, Clone said and smiled mockingly. The Source Pill is extremely rare, but even after taking this pill, the chances of an S ranker successfully becoming a rank 1 core evolver are less than 50%. On the other hand, by using the Tower of Ascension, the chances of an S ranker becoming a rank 1 core evolver are almost 100%. There are hundreds of thousands of demons in Utopia who couldn't evolve further after becoming S rankers and are completely useless. But what if those hundreds of thousands of demons become rank 1 evolvers? Once these demons evolve into rank 1 core evolvers, the power of demons will increase to a completely different level, and no quote. All right, Evan stopped Clone from speaking further because he already knew what he was going to say next. All in all, you did all this so that Nate and others would summon demons. By using the summoning formations that you taught them, and the main goal of those demons was to plunder the resources of this world to reach S rank, and use the Tower of Ascension to directly become a rank 1 core evolver, right? Yes, Clone nodded his head. You don't know much about Utopia, so you can't understand the value of rank evolvers. But once you go there, you will understand why I am doing this. I can already guess why you are doing this. But it's not like I give a sh*t, because I have the growth link skill that is broken beyond belief, Evan muttered in a low voice that only he could hear. Since I answered your question, now it is my turn to ask you something, Clone said and leaned forward. Who are you? He asked while narrowing his eyes. Not only I can feel world essence and conceptual energy from you, even though you are just an S ranker, but you even know about demon language that you use to modify the ritual conductor and take control over the demons that were summoned by the Dark Guild. Who taught you the demon language? Quote. Evan scratched the back of his head hearing Clone. Will you believe me if I say I learned the demon language in my dreams? Clone's eyes turned cold when he heard Evan. Are you messing with me? Evan sighed when he saw Clone's cold look and spread his hands. I know it sounds absurd, but it is the truth. I really learned the demon language in my dreams. Clone looked at Evan's expression carefully and fell into deep thought. From the look on his face, it doesn't seem like he is lying, Clone thought inwardly. Although I was able to preserve my ego after being sent inside the dungeon by the laws of this world, I lost most of my memories and knowledge, so I can't even confirm if there was any case similar to him in the past. What about the world essence and the conceptual energy? You are just an S ranker, so why can I feel the world essence and conceptual energy from you? He asked Evan after a moment. I just answered your question, so don't you think it is my turn to ask a question now? Clone looked at Evan for a few seconds and took a deep breath. What do you want to ask now? I don't want to ask anything now, Evan said and stood up from his chair. What do you mean? I meant what I just said, Evan said and put his chair away. I have no more questions to ask, so our Q&A session is over. What about my questions? I still want to ask you about some things. Why should I care about your questions? It is not like I owe you money, right? Evan said with a smile on his face. A dangerous aura started to come out from Clone's body, but Evan completely ignored him. After watching him carefully this whole time, I already know how to defeat this guy, so there's no point in delaying any longer, Evan muttered to himself, and used the second effect of the growth link skill. Using the second effect of the growth link skill, Evan took Blood Demon's skill Blood Manipulation. Although I cannot see it with my eyes, I am sure this guy is still absorbing the blood energy that is coming inside the dungeon from the portal, Evan said, and activated the Blood Manipulation skill. Rumble. The moment Evan activated the Blood Manipulation skill, the blood dome started to shake, and Clone's expression changed. Chapter 629. The moment Evan activated the Blood Manipulation skill, the blood dome started to shake. Blood that was previously invisible became visible and started to gather in front of Evan. "Don't you dare!" Clone shouted in a rage-filled voice when he saw blood that was supposed to be absorbed by the dome gathering in front of Evan. Suddenly a suction force erupted from the dome, and all the blood that Evan had gathered in front of him started to move towards the dome once again. "You think you are the only one who can absorb the blood?" Evan sneered when he felt the suction force coming from the dome and lifted his hand. Energy devouring vines came out of his palm and wrapped around the blood he was continuously gathering. By using the blood manipulation skill, the green devouring vines turned red and started to absorb all the blood that Evan was gathering. Through the devouring vines, a huge amount of energy rushed inside Evan's body, but since Evan's both of the cores were already at S rank, all the energy that he absorbed through the vines was expelled from his body. Although the energy was expelled, Evan didn't care because the energy he had expelled could not be absorbed by the dome. Clone's slightly red skin turned pure red because of anger when he saw what Evan was doing, and a dangerous aura filled the surroundings. Evan's face turned serious when he felt Clone's dangerous aura, and he used 20% of his mana in one go to use the blood manipulation skill. Just as Evan used the 20% of his mana, the blood dome started to crack. The foundation of this blood dome weakened greatly. Now that it can't absorb the blood, if I break it, I should be able to stop the rampaging scene that is happening outside, Evan thought, and along with blood manipulation, he activated gravity manipulation as well. While talking with Clone earlier, Evan noticed that the mental energy waves that were spreading outside of the dungeon were actually coming out from the blood dome. Not only that, all the blood that came inside the dungeon from the portal was being absorbed by the dome, and Clone was absorbing that blood through his connection with the dome. The more blood Clone absorbs, the more powerful his aura becomes. By absorbing the blood of the people, Clone was not only changing his life essence so that he could escape from the dungeon, but he was also recovering the powers that he lost after creating the ability bead. The energy fluctuations that were coming out of the dungeon portal when Evan entered were A rank because of the backlash he had received after creating the ability bead. But the energy fluctuations of the dungeon had already reached S rank, and if Evan wanted to stop him from recovering his full power, he had to destroy the blood dome first. Even though Evan had cut off its energy supply by using the blood manipulation skill, it was still not an easy task to destroy the blood dome. It would have been easier if he could go inside the blood dome and destroy it from inside by killing Clone, but the blood dome was filled with miasma, and that miasma was giving him a sense of extreme danger. Evan didn't want to enter the blood dome rashly and get trapped inside, which is why he could only try to destroy it from outside. Rumble. When Evan used the gravity manipulation skill along with the blood manipulation, the dome started to shake, and the cracks that were present on it enlarged. "Don't think you can do whatever you want here," Clone shouted in a rage-filled voice, when he saw the dome was cracking, and used the miasma to cover it from inside. Just as Clone covered the dome with the miasma, the cracks that had appeared on it started to recover. The suction force of the dome became stronger, and Evan wasn't able to stop the blood even by using the blood manipulation skill. The dome once again started to absorb blood, and Clone's aura started to increase. "Darn it," Evan cursed and tried to stop the blood from being absorbed by the dome. But the suction force that was coming out from the dome after it was covered by the miasma was far too strong, and Evan couldn't do anything about it. "You just wait there. Once I fully recover my strength, I will give you a painful death," Clone shouted with a furious smile on his face, and continued to absorb the blood through the dome. "Fine, since you want to play the turtle game, I will play with you seriously," Evan said, and stopped using his skills. After deactivating his skills, Evan turned around and left from there. "Is he thinking about running away?" Clone muttered, but he didn't try to stop Evan. Soon Evan disappeared from his sight. Although Clone was confused as to what Evan was trying to do, he didn't think too much about it, and continued to absorb the blood to recover his powers. 3 minutes later, Clone noticed Evan flying back towards him. Why did he come back? Clone raised an eyebrow when he noticed Evan. Evan didn't say anything after coming back and stopped a few meters above the blood dome. After stopping, he looked at Clone from the sky and grinned. Seeing the grin on Evan's face, a bad feeling started to grow in Clone's heart. "Thunder Tempest," Evan said, and black lightning clouds started to gather above the blood dome. Crackle! Black lightning arcs started thundering inside the cloud, and within a few seconds, the cloud of lightning spread over 50 kilometers. Crackle! Giant bolts of black lightning that were filled with fearsome powers moved inside the cloud like snakes. Looking at the giant lightning cloud, Clone gulped down his saliva and used more miasma to cover the blood dome. Evan ignored what Clone was doing and looked at the lightning cloud with a serious look on his face. Once the lightning cloud was fully formed, he controlled it by using his spiritual power, and the size of the cloud started to shrink. The lightning arcs that were moving inside the cloud also started to gather at the same place, and merged with other lightning arcs. In less than 1 minute, the lightning cloud, which was 50 kilometers big, shrieked to the size of 3 kilometers, and all the lightning arcs within it merged into one giant lightning arc. Crackle! The giant lightning arc crackled inside the cloud like an ancient dragon, and a terrifying aura filled the dungeon. Beads of sweat rolled down from Evan's forehead, and he looked at the lightning cloud with a wide smile on his face. He took a deep breath after everything was done and looked at Clone, who was staring at the lightning cloud. "Try your best to survive, UASS*Ole," Evan shouted and used 50,000 souls as fuel to increase the power of the lightning cloud. The moment Evan used 50,000 souls, a white aura enveloped the black cloud. A dangerous aura that was far more powerful than before filled the dungeon, and all the hairs on Evan's body stood up to no end. Evan rarely uses the soul absorption skill to increase the power of his skills, because this skill is a double-edged sword. By using this skill, he can increase the power of any skill beyond its original limit. After increasing the power of any skill by using soul absorption, Evan can't control that skill like his normal skills. He had used the soul absorption skill a few times in the past, and every time he used it, he was either injured or was not able to control his skill properly. During some of his tests, he used soul absorption to increase the power of non-lethal skills like ice chains. But when he increased the power of the ice chains skill, Evan found the mental energy consumption for the skill increased by at least 3 times, and it became incredibly hard for him to control the ice chains and bind his targets. The shadow bullet skill was the same. When he increased its power using the soul absorption skill, he was not able to control the bullet, and the mental energy consumption to control the bullet also increased greatly. Although the soul absorption skill was powerful, there were still many risks in using it, which is why Evan does not use it unless necessary. But now things were a little different. Now he had something that could help him escape from the onslaught of the skills that could kill him after he increases their power. By using soul absorption skill, the moment Evan used 50,000 souls and felt the aura of death engulfing his body, he did not wait even for a second, and used his newly gained skill, Soul Beacon. He disappeared over the blood dome and appeared 2,000 kilometers away, where he had earlier placed the B+ rank Soul Beacon. Crackle! A crackling sound like the roar of an ancient beast reverted throughout the dungeon, and Evan saw a bright flash of lighting erupting from the direction of the dungeon. Although he was 2,000 kilometers away from the blood dome, Evan still felt powerful energy waves of lightning coming in his direction. The energy waves of lightning lasted for about 1 hour. After 1 hour, Evan slowly flew in the direction of the blood dome. While flying towards the blood dome, Evan looked at the surroundings of the dungeon, and he saw only one thing: complete destruction. Everything was destroyed, and the white lightning arcs were still cracking on the ground. Soon Evan reached the place where the blood dome used to be, and when he saw the condition of the place where the blood dome was located, a smile appeared on his face. The blood dome and miasma disappeared from the place without leaving behind a single trace. The only thing that dissatisfied Evan was that Clone was still standing in the spot where the blood dome used to be, and from his condition, Evan could tell that he was only superficially injured. Looks like that miasma was far stronger than I initially thought, Evan thought, when he saw Clone was still alive. Suddenly Clone lifted his head and looked at Evan. His yellow eyes blazed with coldness, and a burst of red flames erupted from his body. Chapter 630. A burst of red flames erupted from Clone's body, and he extended his hand forward. Just as he extended his hand, the red flames that were circling around him moved and took the shape of a sharp red spear. Clone grabbed the red spear and looked at Evan like he was looking at a dead man. Even though Clone's aura was similar to the aura of an S-ranker, Evan still felt a sense of extreme danger the moment he looked at him. But instead of getting nervous after feeling the sense of danger from Clone, Evan showed a wild smile. and wore his Blazabringer gauntlets. That was slightly damaged because of Nate's last attack. Clone sneered when he saw Evan's smile and took a step forward. He turned into a streak of red light and shot towards Evan like a bullet. Evan also took a step forward and used his skill the flicker step to move towards Clone. Although Evan's agility was monstrously high and he even used the flicker step skill, Clone was still slightly faster than him, and closed the distance between them first. Gust of red flames circled around Clone's spear, and using his high momentum, he stabbed at Evan with his deep red spear. Clone didn't use any kind of skill while stabbing. It was just a normal stab, but the sharp aura coming out from the red spear still ripped apart the space, and Evan felt as if his body was being stabbed by countless knives even before he clashed against the spear. Feeling the danger of the spear, Evan didn't hold back in the slightest, and used the skill of his Blazabringer gauntlets, Basilisk's Wrath. Basilisk's Wrath. Upon activation, the Blazabringer gauntlets transform into basilisk-like claws, empowering the user's attacks with fiery breath. Each strike of gauntlets releases scorching flames that can pierce through even the toughest defenses. Skill duration, 3 minutes. This skill can be used twice a day. Along with Basilisk's Wrath skill, Evan used Sonic Resonance as well, and the space around his fist trembled. Evan's fist and Clone's spear arrived in front of each other in an instant. Even before both of them clashed, the space around them started to shake. The red fire coming out from the spear and the sun's true fire that was coming out from the gauntlets increased the temperature in the few kilometers of the area to a completely different level. Finally, the ruby red colored gauntlet that was releasing sonic vibrations and the red spear enveloped by the fire connected. For a moment, time seemed to stop flowing the moment both of the weapons connected. But this didn't last long. Even though Clone and Evan clashed high in the sky, the ground of the dungeon started to shake. The red clouds in the sky stopped moving and began to tremble. Clone's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when their weapons connected. Although he had already seen Evan's terrifying power when he destroyed his blood dome earlier, he still felt all of his understanding of the world being turned upside down because of Evan's absurd power. Bang, 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 bang. Suddenly, all the clouds within the radius of 20 kilometers exploded, and a rain of magma started to pour down from the sky. Rumble. The sky started to rumble, and the ground was cracked open. Boom. In the end, a doomsday-like explosion shook the entire dungeon. A sphere of vacuum that was hundreds of meters wide exploded outward with Evan and Clone in its center. Everything that was caught inside the explosion of the vacuum bubble turned into dust. When Evan's fist connected with the spear, a sharp aura penetrated his body through the gauntlet, and he felt as if his internal organs were being ground by a sharp blade. Feeling the sharp pain coming from his internal organs, Evan almost lost his balance in mid-air. From the clash, Clone didn't come out unscathed either. When his spear connected with Evan's fist gauntlet, Clone felt as if his hands had been struck by a bullet train. The red spear in his hands shattered into countless fragments of fire, and the bones of his fingers nearly turned into dust. The sonic vibrations of Sonic Resonance skill struck his body, and he was sent flying towards the ground like a meteorite. Evan wanted to continue his attack, seeing Clone was sent crashing down towards the ground, but before he could attack, cough. He suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood, and a painful expression crossed his face. He circulated the shadow energy within his body, and tried to stop the ramping sharp aura of the spear that had penetrated his body earlier. Although the spear was destroyed the moment it came into contact with his fist, its sharp aura was still wreaking havoc inside Evan's body. Boom. Swish. While Evan was still trying to get rid of the sharp aura of the spear, a booming sound echoed out from the place where Clone had crashed earlier. Before Evan could react, Clone appeared in front of him like a rocket launcher. His leg turned into a whip, and without giving Evan a single chance to do anything, he struck him right on his chest. Crack. A few of Evan's ribs were broken because of the kick, and he was sent crashing down a few hundred meters away from his position. Bang. He crashed to the ground, and a dust cloud rose high in the sky. Clone was preparing to continue attacking, but suddenly, whoosh, Evan's haggard figure came out from the dust cloud, and he started to run away from there. Clone was surprised when he noticed Evan recovered from his attack so quickly, but soon a cold smile appeared on his face. "Do you think you can escape from here?" he shouted, and red fire burst forth from his body. In an instant, Clone arrived just behind Evan, who was still trying to run away. The moment he arrived behind Evan, Clone's fingernails enlarged and his hands turned into sharp claws. "This is the end," he said in a loud voice, and pierced Evan's heart from behind. Cough. Evan spat out blood when his heart was pierced, and he slowly turned his head to look at Clone. But when Evan turned around and Clone looked at his face, he felt something was not right. Burst. Suddenly, Evan's body exploded into a puff of black smoke and disappeared, leaving behind a triangular-shaped object. Before Clone could understand what was happening, all the hairs on his body stood up, and he quickly looked behind him. Surprise mother user. The moment Clone turned around, Evan, who was hiding using the shadow walk skill, appeared behind him and threw a punch right at his face. Clone quickly created a firewall in front of him to stop Evan, but just as Clone created the firewall, the triangular-shaped object that Evan's shadow clone left behind flashed, and Evan appeared right behind Clone. Another surprise mother user. Clone heard Evan's voice coming from behind him, and before he could do anything, Evan's fist struck his head, destroying it like a watermelon. Chapter 631. Using the Soul Beacon skill, Evan appeared right behind Clone. His Blazabringer gauntlet blazed with the sun's true fire, and using the Sonic Resonance skill, he punched the backside of Clone's head. Bang! Like a watermelon, Clone's head exploded into bloody red pulp and scattered in the air. But instead of feeling happy after destroying Clone's head, Evan clicked his tongue in annoyance. "I know it won't be that easy," he muttered in a low voice, as he watched the red bloody pulp of Clone's head turn into red fire. Clone's headless body moved on its own and moved away from Evan. After Clone's headless body moved away from Evan, the red fire once again attached itself to Clone, and his head returned to normal. "You nearly got me there," Clone said as soon as his head regenerated. A new red fire spear appeared in his hand, and without giving Evan a chance to do anything, he vertically slashed in his direction. Just as Clone slashed, all hairs on Evan's body stood up to no end, and he immediately used the Wind Walk skill to move away from his position. The moment Evan moved away, the ground was split open in a thin straight line, and a torrent of red fire erupted from the split ground. After dodging Clone's attack, when Evan looked at him once again, he saw Clone had already disappeared from his previous position, and was now hovering 100 meters above the ground. Clone's spear was pointed in his direction, and a small red orb was spinning at the tip of the spear. When Evan saw the small red orb rotating on the tip of the spear, an overwhelming feeling of danger overtook his body. A suffocating feeling that he had felt when Nate had used the ability bead filled his heart, his breathing quickened, and his body began to stiffen. "If I can't stop this attack, I am dead for sure," Evan thought inwardly, and tried to regain control over his body. Suddenly, the pressure he was feeling increased tenfold, and the space around him solidified. Evan lifted his head and saw the red orb on the tip of the spear stop rotating. Clone's deep yellow eyes flashed with coldness, and he opened his mouth. "Blaze, Nova." The moment Clone uttered those words, a sense of impending doom far stronger than any sense of danger he had felt before engulfed Evan's body. Subconsciously, he activated the Temporal Velocity skill, and used 5,000 souls as fuel to increase its power. Time seemed to stop in Evan's eyes the moment he used Temporal Velocity, along with the Soul Absorption skill. He looked at Clone and saw the small orb detach itself from the spear, and was now heading in his direction. Temporal Velocity is a skill that directly affects its user's mind, making his mind work several times faster than normal. So the consequences of using Soul Absorption on a skill that directly affects its user's mind were not normal. Evan felt a splitting headache, and his eyes started to bleed the moment he used the skill. His face turned pale, and he wanted nothing more than to pass out at this point. Although Evan wanted nothing more than to pass out, he still gritted his teeth and pointed one of his fingers towards the fire orb that was coming in his direction. He created a shadow bullet using the shadow energy, and used 50,000 souls as fuel to increase the power of the bullet. Arg! A painful grunt escaped from Evan's mouth when he used the Soul Absorption skill to increase the power of the two skills at the same time, and he nearly passed out because of the burden that these skills were putting on his mind and soul. Evan's eyes turned bloodshot, but he didn't take his eyes off from the orb that was slowly moving in his direction. It was very difficult for him to control and hit a target by using the shadow bullet, which is strengthened by using the Soul Absorption skill. But because of the Temporal Velocity skill, he was able to properly aim at the fire orb. Once Evan was sure that his aim was perfect, he released the shadow bullet and stopped using the temporal velocity skill. Bang! The shadow bullet tore through the space and went straight towards the fire orb. Although it may seem like a long time had passed since Clone had used his Blaze Nova, in reality, not even a second had passed since the moment Clone had shot the Blaze Nova and Evan used temporal velocity and shadow bullet skills. Evan felt a headache that could make anyone go insane the moment he stopped using the temporal velocity skill. Although he used the skills only for a split second, in that split second, he had used nearly 40% of his spiritual power to control the power of shadow bullet and temporal velocity skills. The small black bullet reached in front of the deep red fire orb in an instant. Although Clone was not sure what kind of skill Evan had used, he could feel the overwhelming power that was hidden deep within the small black bullet. When his Blaze Nova and Evan's shadow bullet were about to collide, all hairs on Clone's body stood up, and he immediately turned around to fly away from there. Evan's instincts were also screaming, but he couldn't even lift his head to look at the bullet and Blaze Nova, because his head was spinning, and he felt as if his eyes would burst at any moment. Finally, the bullet and the fire orb clashed with each other. The moment they came into contact with each other, the orb and the bullet disappeared. The world turned completely silent as if everything was normal. But the silence did not last long, because a split second after the bullet and the fire orb disappeared, the dungeon started to shake. Boom! A doomsday-like explosion reverted throughout the dungeon, and world-destroying shockwaves ripped outwards in every single direction. Evan and Clone, both of them were caught in the shockwaves. Evan's condition was already not good after using the temporal velocity and shadow bullet skills. So the moment he was caught in the shockwaves, his mind went blank. He couldn't feel anything, and he just knew that his body was flying far away because of the shockwaves. At the last moment when he was just about to lose consciousness, Evan bit his tongue so hard that his teeth dug deep inside it, and he was finally able to regain his senses. But the moment he regained his senses, he felt an overwhelming pain coming from all over his body. Evan was not able to endure the pain and screamed out loud. F***K, F***K, F***K. Evan looked at the left side of his body and noticed his left hand and leg had exploded into blood mist because of the shockwaves. All the bones within his body were broken, and his internal organs were in a complete mess. If he had really lost consciousness a moment ago, he would have definitely died here. Evan started to take deep breaths, and used the Death Transfer skill to heal himself. One of the shadow undeads who was outside of the dungeon was destroyed, and Evan immediately returned to the perfect condition. After recovering, he quickly created a barrier around him, and waited for the shockwaves to subside. Clone can also recover just like me, but I am sure he will be in worse condition than me, Evan muttered, and after a minute when the shockwaves slowed down, he quickly used shadow wings to fly back. In just a few seconds, he returned to the place where he was before the explosion, and used his spiritual senses to look for Clone. Found you. Using his spiritual senses, Evan found Clone in no time, and saw him flying away in the opposite direction. He was missing his right arm, and his body was filled with injuries. On a closer look, Evan noticed Clone's arm was regenerating at a very slow speed, clearly indicating that he was almost out of energy. He must have used up a lot of energy in order to survive the earlier shockwaves, Evan said, and soon saw Clone flying away with his eyes. I will finish him in a single attack, Evan muttered, and used the wind walk skill to arrive right behind Clone. All of his power gathered around his fist, and he was about to finish off Clone when, "Got you!" He heard Clone's voice, and before he could react, Clone turned around and struck a red fireball right on his chest. Chapter 632. The red fireball in Clone's hand struck Evan's chest. The moment the fireball struck his chest, Evan subconsciously activated Crimson Veil skill. Crimson Veil, unique skill. Using the blood lightning as the medium, the user can become partially incorporeal. While in this state, the user can phase through obstacles and attacks. This state will last for 15 seconds. The power of the user's skills increases by 150% while they are in the partially incorporeal state. Cooldown time, 6 hours. He wanted to activate the Titanic Resilience skill as well, but he didn't get time to activate it on time. Boom. With a loud booming sound, the fireball exploded. Although Evan had activated the Crimson Veil skill, he was still a step too late, and his right shoulder was blasted into smithness. A fountain of hot red blood erupted, and while still in partial incorporeal form, Evan was thrown away from Clone. His chest felt heavy, and Evan spat out a mouthful of blood even before crashing to the ground. F***K, if I was a step too late my body would have blown into countless pieces. Evan balanced himself in mid-air, and breathed heavily, while trying to stop the blood, by using the regeneration and ember vitality skills. Clone was also blasted away because of the impact of the fireball, but he didn't suffer any damage when the fireball exploded. Although Clone didn't receive any damage after the fireball exploded, his condition was still not good. After using so many powerful skills like Blaze Nova regenerating his head and surviving the onslaught of the Thunder Tempest skill, he had used up most of his energy. He was panting heavily after being blasted away by the fireball, and his missing right arm was regenerating very slowly. Although my condition is better than him, I am also almost out of the shadow energy, Evan muttered, after seeing Clone was almost on his knees. During the entire fight, Evan was using the shadow energy without holding back. Although Clone couldn't use domain because he wasn't a rank 1 core evolver, he could still use conceptual energy, and without using the shadow energy, it was very difficult for Evan to harm Clone, whose body was overflowing with the conceptual energy. Let's end this. Evan wiped out the trickle of blood that was coming out from the corner of his mouth, and shot towards Clone once again. Although Clone was panting heavily, he didn't back down either when he saw Evan coming towards him, and he shot forward as well. The sound of fight once again filled the dungeon, and powerful shockwaves devastated the already tattered land. Both Evan and Clone were at their wits' ends, and were using everything they had in order to finish off their opponents. Even though both of them were at their wits' ends, they still continued to fight for more than 1 hour without stopping. After 1 hour, both Evan and Clone were drenched in their own blood. Their bodies were filled with injuries, and there wasn't a single bone in their body which was still intact. This bastard is really in a completely different league, Evan thought while panting heavily. Blood was trickling down from his face, and his tired eyes were slowly turning back to black once again, as he had used Bloodlust skill earlier, and now its duration ended. During this 1 hour, other than his shadow energy, Evan had used up all of his mana as well, but he still wasn't able to finish off Clone. You are one hell of a tough bastard. Evan heard Clone's voice, and saw similar to his eyes. Clone's deep yellow eyes had also lost their previous luster, and now were filled with tiredness. His right arm, which was slowly regenerating, previously had already stopped healing, and his entire body was covered in blood. I never expected that I would find myself in such a situation in a lower world, Clone said, and the small sparks of red fire around his body once again started to blaze. Although I lost most of my memories after being sent inside the dungeon, I am still aware that I am someone who is above billions of people in Utopia. The blaze of red fire around Clone increased even more. If I can't kill you today, I will never be able to lift my head proudly. Boom. A pillar of fire erupted from Clone's body, and his aura started to increase. Even if I have to perish along with you, I will definitely kill you today. Clone's body started to disintegrate, but the power of red fire that was coming out of his body started to increase at a fearsome speed. Thanks for your generous offer, but I have no plans of perishing along with you, Evan said, and stretched out his left hand. Just as he stretched out his left hand, his shadow flickered a bit, and carnage shot out from his shadow storage. Evan caught the carnage with one hand and aimed it in Clone's direction. You want to stop me by using this toy of yours, Clone said with a sneer on his face. When he saw Evan aiming carnage in his direction, Evan took a deep breath when he heard Clone, and brought the backside of carnage near his chest, while still aiming in his direction. It is not a toy, UJACK*SS. A blood red aura appeared around carnage, and a small needle which was at the back of it pierced Evan's chest, going straight inside his heart. It's the carnage. Gulp gulp. The sound of someone drinking filled the surroundings, and the blood red aura around carnage intensified. Evan's face turned pale when carnage absorbed his blood, but a dangerous smile appeared on his face. Red sparks start to spin in front of Carnage's muzzle, and a bloody aura filled the surroundings. Slowly, the red sparks started to merge with each other, and soon a blood-red bullet that was sparkling with red light formed in front of Carnage's muzzle. Once the bullet was fully formed, Evan's eyes blazed with red light for a moment, and he opened his mouth. Blood bullet. Chapter 633, Blood Bullet. Use 10% of your blood essence to create a bullet that can destroy 50% blood essence of the target upon coming into contact with their body. If your blood essence has the power of a bloodline within it, the blood bullet will carry the power of that bloodline. You can enhance the effect of the bloodline that the blood bullet will carry with it by sacrificing more of your blood essence while creating the blood bullet. The blood of the hunters and the blood of the normal people are very different from each other. As the rank of a hunter's core increases, his body also changes along with it. In order to sustain the power of the core when its rank increases, the physiques of the hunters also become more powerful. When the physiques of the hunters become powerful, it is natural that their bones, internal organs, flesh and blood also become far stronger than the normal people. Unlike the blood of normal people, the blood of hunters contains a thing called blood essence. This blood essence is the thing that makes the blood of the hunters different from the blood of normal people. In other words, the blood essence can be said to be the accumulation of all the blood energy of a hunter's blood. If the blood essence of a hunter is extracted or destroyed, their blood will turn into normal blood. Without the power of the blood essence, the body of the hunters will be greatly weakened, and it would be impossible for them to use their full power without recovering their blood essence. Even losing 10% of blood essence can reduce a hunter's power greatly, because their body wouldn't be able to function normally without the power of the blood essence. So losing 50% blood essence will make most of the hunters incapable of fighting. By using the blood bullet skill, Evan could destroy 50% blood essence of his target instantly, making them unable to fight. Not only that, the blood bullet will carry the effect of his Doombringer bloodline with it that he can enhance by sacrificing his blood essence. Current effects of the Doombringer bloodline. The power of all shadow type skills increased by 20%. All of your attack type skills will now carry the essence of the Doombringer bloodline, and will have a 0.1% chance of triggering an instant death effect regardless of your target's rank. Currently, he can't infuse his skills inside the blood bullet, so the effect where his bloodline increases the power of all of his shadow type skills by 20% was useless. Maybe, in future, when he increases the rank of the Carnage, he will be able to infuse his shadow type skills inside the blood bullet, and will be able to use this effect. But for now, the only bloodline effect that the blood bullet can carry with itself is the instant death effect. The chances of triggering the instant death effect were just 0.1%, but by sacrificing his blood essence while creating the blood bullet, he could increase the probability of triggering the instant death effect. There was no exact answer as to how much the chance of triggering the instant death effect would increase after sacrificing his blood essence. But Evan knew that the more he sacrificed, the greater the chance of triggering the instant death effect would be. And in order to increase the chance of triggering the instant death effect, Evan sacrificed 40% of his blood essence while creating the blood bullet. In total, he lost 50% of his blood essence, 10% to create the blood bullet and 40% to increase the chances of triggering the instant death effect. Of course, Evan was not a fool, and knew he was taking a big risk by using 50% of his blood essence. But the reason he used 50% of his blood essence was because he was sure that he would be able to keep himself safe even after using 50% of his blood essence. Once the blood bullet hits clone, he would also lose 50% of his blood essence similar to Evan, and it would take him a long time to recover that blood essence. But Evan was different. It had already been 1.5 hours since he had used the death transfer skill. After 30 more minutes, he would be able to use the death transfer skill once again. Losing his blood essence is also a type of physical injury. So once he uses the death transfer skill, all of his lost blood essence will naturally recover, and he will return to his perfect condition. Even if the instant death effect of the bloodline doesn't trigger once Evan uses the blood bullet skill, all he will need to do will be to avoid clone for the next 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, when he fully recovers using the death transfer skill, he will be able to easily finish off clone, who will still be struggling because of losing 50% of his blood essence. Evan's face turned pale white, and his body became extremely feeble when he used 50% of his blood essence to create the blood bullet. Red sparks flashed around the blood bullet that formed in front of the Carnage muzzle, and looking at the small red bullet, Clone felt a deep sense of crisis engulfing his body. Although Evan's aura dropped to the point where Clone knew he could easily kill him, he still felt a sense of danger like never before coming from the feeble aura of Evan. Feeling the danger of death coming from the small bullet, Clone created a barrier of red fire around him. Evan's breathing became rough after creating the blood bullet, and he tried his best not to collapse before shooting the blood bullet. When Clone created the fire barrier around him, Evan didn't show any kind of reaction, and brought his finger on the trigger of the carnage. After fighting against Clone for more than 1.5 hours, Evan was already out of shadow energy and mana. The only thing that was left inside his core was the small amount of world essence he had. Suddenly, the world essence that was inside Evan's core disappeared, and a black aura engulfed his entire body. For the first time since he had received it, Evan activated his authority, Master of Shadows. Master of Shadows, Authority. Using your authority, Master of Shadows, you can give absolute effect to all of your skills. During the absolute effect, all of your skills will ignore 100% defense of the target, your skills won't be restricted by your rank, and the chances of the critical hit increase by 75%. After activating the authority, the absolute effect of Master of Shadows will last for 20 seconds. Master of Shadows authority can only be used once a month, and it requires world essence to activate. The moment Evan activated the Master of Shadows authority, a strange power engulfed his entire body, and the blood bullet which was releasing red sparks in front of Carnage's muzzle. For a moment, Evan felt like he could do anything after he activated his authority. The feeling of using authority was very different from the feeling he felt while using a skill. It was like the authority he just used was the higher form of the skills he normally uses. This feeling was very strange. But at the same time, Evan felt that if he could fully understand this feeling, he might be able to get something good out of it. Although Evan wanted to immerse himself in this feeling, he knew he didn't have time for this. He forcefully stopped thinking about the authority he had just used, and focused back on the red fire barrier in front of him. Does he think this cheap barrier can stop my blood bullet? Evan muttered in a low, weak voice, and pressed the trigger. Just as Evan pressed the trigger, the red sparks around the blood bullet clashed against each other, generating a powerful force that shot the blood bullet forward at the speed of light. Under the effect of Master of Shadows authority, the blood bullet pierced through the fire barrier like it was made of paper. Ugh, not even a second had passed after the blood bullet had penetrated the fire barrier, when Evan heard a heart-wrenching scream. The fire barrier in front of Evan slowly cracked and shattered into countless motes of firelight. Once the barrier disappeared, Clone's figure, which was still covered in red fire, appeared in front of Evan. On a closer look, Evan noticed a small bullet-sized hole right in the middle of Clone's chest. Suddenly, the red fire Clone was accumulating to launch one last attack to kill Evan began to disappear, and the aura around his body became extremely weak. 50% blood essence of your target has been destroyed. When Evan saw the notification, a small sigh of relief escaped from his mouth, and he dropped Carnage to the ground, as it was not easy for him to hold the weight of Carnage, after losing 50% of his blood essence. Critical hit. One more notification flashed in front of Evan's retina, informing him about another effect of the Master of Shadows authority, and finally, his lips curled upwards slightly. Since it is a critical hit and the blood bullet could trigger instant death effect, Evan muttered in a weak voice in the next second. Instant death effect of your Doombringer bloodline triggered. Suddenly, a black aura engulfed Clone's body. A look of horror crossed his face, and before he could do anything, his eyes turned white, and his life aura disappeared. Thud. The red fire around Clone's body completely extinguished, and his body dropped to the ground. Thud. Evan also dropped to the ground and panted heavily. He looked at Clone for a few seconds and closed his eyes. If only I had my shadow undeads with me, he muttered in a low voice, and put Carnage back into his shadow storage. He was about to lie down, so that he could wait for the cooldown of his death transfer skill to end, but before he could lie down, Evan saw Clone's body start to break into motes of white light, and those motes of white light disappeared into the void. This quote: when Evan saw what was happening, he remembered what had happened when he killed Elijah in the ruins of the Verdant Wilds dungeon. Similar to Clone's body, Elijah's body also started to disappear into motes of white light when he killed her. At that time, he had used Shadow Resurrection skill to stop Elijah's body from disappearing, and turned her into a shadow undead. But the current situation was way different than at that time. I don't have even a drop of shadow energy inside my monarch core, so I can't use Shadow Resurrection on him for now, Evan muttered, and quickly tried to put Clone's body into his shadow storage. But when he tried to put Clone's body into his shadow storage, Evan was shocked to find out that he couldn't place it inside his shadow storage. When he could not put the body into the shadow storage, he tried to place it into the storage ring, but that was also useless. In the end, Clone's entire body turned into motes of white light, and that white light disappeared into void. Why do I feel like I just **********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************body disappeared. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire dungeon started to shake. Damn it, Evan dropped to the ground because of the shaking of the dungeon and looked around him with a startled look on his face. What the hell is happening now? He asked himself and tried to stand up, but because his body was very weak because of the loss of blood essence, he couldn't even stand up properly. Whoosh! Suddenly, a strange power enveloped Evan's body. When Evan felt the power that enveloped him, he sighed in relief and relaxed his body. So the dungeon is closing and I am being sent out of here, he said and closed his eyes. Just when Evan's body was about to disappear from the dungeon, he thought about something and abruptly opened his eyes. Since I am being sent out of the dungeon, it must mean I cleared it, Evan said, and stood up like the loss of the blood essence was not affecting his body in the slightest. Since I cleared the dungeon, there must be a clear reward, right? Evan started to look around like a hungry lion after standing up. In just a few seconds, his entire body turned transparent, and he was about to disappear from the dungeon. Although he was about to disappear, Evan did not find any reward for clearing the dungeon. Don't tell me I am not going to get anything even though I almost died here, Evan said in a depressed voice when he did not find anything. Just when Evan's body was about to completely disappear, he suddenly noticed something on the ground. Without caring about anything, Evan jumped forward and grabbed the thing that was on the ground. The moment Evan grabbed the thing, a white light flashed and his body disappeared from the dungeon. Chapter 634. A bright white light flashed in the middle of the wilderness, and out of nowhere Evan appeared just outside of the dungeon portal. Crack! Just as Evan appeared outside of the dungeon, he heard the sound of something cracking, and noticed the golden barrier that was covering the dungeon portal was breaking. Crack, crack, cracked. Soon the cracks spread all over the barrier like spider webs, and like a fragile glass, the golden barrier broke into countless motes of light. Whoosh! Just as the barrier broke, the dungeon portal shrank and disappeared from the wilderness of Central City. Thud! Evan once again dropped to the ground after the dungeon portal disappeared and panted heavily. The adrenaline boost he had received earlier in order to search for the clearing reward ended, and now he was exhausted beyond belief. Without even looking at the reward he picked up at the last second before being sent out of the dungeon, Evan closed his eyes and tried to adjust his breathing. Around 30 minutes later, the cooldown time of the death transfer skill ended, and Evan used the skill to return back to his peak condition. To Evan's surprise, after using the death transfer skill, he noticed that the shadow undead of the flame demon whom he chose as the target to transfer his injury was completely fine, and wasn't affected at all, even though he had used the death transfer skill on him. I was in a weakened condition because I had lost 50% of my blood essence, but this situation doesn't affect the shadow undead of the flame demon, because my shadow undeads don't have blood inside their bodies, Evan thought inwardly and stood up. After standing up, he finally looked at the thing he had picked up just before leaving the dungeon. What is this? Evan raised an eyebrow when he saw the thing that he had picked up before leaving the dungeon was actually a 5 centimeters long black stick. He focused his gaze on the stick, and its details appeared in front of his retina. Small broken fragment of the realm glyph. Do you want to absorb the fragment of the realm glyph? Yes/no. Realm glyph. Evan narrowed his eyes when he saw the notification in front of him. If I am not wrong, my bloodline awakened because of the realm glyphs, he muttered and scrolled back the notifications he had received in the past few days, and soon saw the notification he was looking for. Your bloodline is awakening because of the realm glyphs. Evan looked at the notification for a few seconds and scratched the back of his head. Should I absorb it? He muttered in an uncertain voice while looking at the small fragment of the realm glyph. Although his bloodline awakened due to the realm glyph, Evan still wasn't sure what exactly this thing was. Since it is a reward, it shouldn't be a bad thing, right? He said to himself and finally chose to absorb the realm glyph. The moment Evan chose yes, The realm glyph fragment turned into black liquid and went inside his body. Evan monitored the black liquid using his spiritual senses, and noticed the black liquid merged with his bones after going inside his body. The realm glyphs that were engraved on his bones flashed for a split second when the small fragment merged with his bones. When the realm glyphs flashed, Evan felt a strange connection with something. But since the realm glyphs flashed only for a brief moment, Evan wasn't able to understand what that connection was. Once the fragment of the realm glyph merged with his bones, Evan looked at his body carefully, hoping something would happen. But even after 5 minutes, nothing happened. "Don't tell me that fragment was useless," Evan said with a twitching mouth, and looked at his body a few more times. After looking at his body for another 10 minutes, Evan finally came to a conclusion. "So that thing was really useless," he said in a barely audible voice. Just thinking about how he tried his best to pick up that useless thing despite his weak condition made his heart ache. "Sigh, forget it. It is not like I can change anything now," Evan said to himself and looked at his shadow undeads. He summoned them back into his shadow storage and flew in the direction of Central City. Now that the dungeon was cleared, the mental energy waves that were affecting the minds of people stopped as well. When he reached the city walls, Evan came across the shadow undeads of the blood demons, who were standing with a large puddle of blood hovering in front of them. During this entire time, the shadow undeads of the blood demons were trying to stop the blood that was going towards the dungeon portal, so the amount of blood they had collected during this entire time was nothing to scoff at. "What should I do with this blood?" Evan muttered in an uncertain voice, looking at the puddle of blood that the blood demons were controlling. Now that both of his cores were at S rank, he couldn't even absorb the blood using the energy devouring skill to increase the rank of his cores. If he absorbs it using the energy devouring, all the blood will just go to the waste. Although I can store this blood inside my shadow storage, it just doesn't sound right to me, Evan said, and looked at the shadow undeads of the blood demons. "Do you have any use for this blood?" "Yes, Master," all the blood demons said at the same time when Evan asked them. "We can store this blood inside our body using the blood bank skill, and can use the stored blood to increase our power during a fight by using the blood boost skill." Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard the blood demons. A skill that allows them to store blood inside their bodies, and a skill that allows them to use that stored blood to increase their power, Evan said inwardly, and thought about taking these two skills by using the second effect of his growth link skill, so that he can also use this method in future to increase his power during a fight. "Since you can use this blood, then go ahead," Evan said, and flew inside the central city. When Evan came inside the city, he saw the entire city was in a complete mess. Because of the Sprite Cuckoo's skill, people were sleeping everywhere. And when Evan flew deeper into the city and reached an area where the Sprite Cuckoos had not yet reached, he saw that some people with weaker willpower had gone crazy because of the earlier mental waves and were still trying to attack people. On top of that, many people who were put to sleep by the Sprite Cuckoos were still injured because of what had happened before they were put to sleep and were bleeding heavily. Just by looking at the condition of those people, Evan could tell that if they did not get timely treatment, it was certain that many of them would die. "What a mess," Evan muttered in a frustrated voice, because he thought that everything would return to normal once he solved the problem of the dungeon. But looking at the situation, he knew that the mess was far from over. At least most of the hunters who are above C rank returned to normal, and now are trying to stabilize the city, Evan said, and took a deep breath. "Although now I have 4,000 shadow undeads, the only person who can use healing magic among them is Alicia," Evan said inwardly, and summoned her. Evan wanted to create more shadow undeads who could use healing magic, but the problem is that the monsters who can use healing magic are very rare. Even though he had killed millions of monsters, he never encountered any monsters who could use healing magic. Come to think of it, Alicia is also most likely an essence clone. "I wonder if I will face any kind of problem because of this once I go to Utopia," Evan said in a low voice after summoning Alicia. He looked at her for a few seconds and rubbed his chin. "Well, from the way she behaves, I am certain that she is the essence clone of a thick-headed elf woman," Evan thought, and nodded his head with certainty. "Master, you are thinking something rude about me, right?" Suddenly Evan heard Alicia's voice, and saw she was looking at him with narrowed eyes. Cough. It is just your imagination. Evan coughed lightly and pointed at people who were lying unconscious on the ground. Can you heal those guys? Elijah looked at Evan for a few extra seconds after hearing him, and finally nodded her head. She lifted one of her hands towards the sky. Whoosh! A white halo that was filled with vitality enveloped Elijah's body, and she started to chant something in Elvish language. Did she receive a new skill after reaching S rank? Evan thought inwardly when he saw Elijah was using a new skill. After a few seconds, Elijah stopped chanting, and the white halo around her body gathered at the palm of her hand, which she had lifted towards the sky earlier. Life Rain, Elijah said, and the white light that gathered at the palm of her hand shot towards the sky. Life Rain. Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard the name of the skill, and used the second effect of the Growth Link skill to look at its details. And the moment he looked at the details of the skill, his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. F***K, I also want to become a shadow undead. Life Rain, unique skill. Sacrifice 90% of your stamina to call upon a gentle rain of healing droplets within an area of 100 kilometers. Each drop of rain possesses potent revitalizing properties that can heal even grave wounds. There is no cooldown time for the Life Rain skill, but once you use this skill, you won't be able to recover your stamina for the next 10 hours, no matter what. Evan took a few deep breaths after reading the details of the skill, and looked at the white drops that were raining down from the sky with a dead look on his face. This is King cheating, he muttered in a low voice, and looked at Elijah enviously. For normal people, using the Life Rain skill will put a great burden on their bodies, because they will lose 90% of their stamina, and will not be able to recover it for the next 10 hours, no matter what they do. But Elijah is different from the normal people. She is a shadow undead, which means she has unlimited stamina. If she wants, she can use the Life Rain skill all the time without worrying about anything. Now she is a walking healing machine, Evan said as he watched Elijah moving all over the city to heal the people using the Life Rain skill. Man, if this was an area of attack type skill instead of healing, Evan muttered and felt a chill running down his spine. Just thinking about a skill that he could use to wreak havoc 24/7 without stopping made his blood boil in excitement. Evan used his spiritual senses and noticed people of the city were returning to normal because of Elijah's Life Rain skill. After confirming that Elijah could heal the people of the city, Evan ignored her and looked around him. Now that I have completed most of the things that I wanted to do in Aurora World, I can use the Tower of Ascension to go to Utopia, Evan said to himself and stretched his body. It's a pity that guy Noah and Nate escaped somewhere. They were both quite special, and I wanted to turn them into my shadow undeads. Suddenly Evan thought about something and his eyes lit up. Although I'm not sure about Noah, I think I can still find Nate, he said, and flew in a certain direction of Central City. Chapter 635. Using the shadow wings, Evan landed on the roof of the biggest building of the Central City, the headquarters of the Hunter Association. After landing, he used his spiritual senses and scanned the entire building. Upon using his spiritual senses, Evan found there were not many people in the building, as most of the hunters went to quell the chaos in the city. But Evan didn't care about the number of people in the building, because he just wanted to find 4 people. But after scanning the entire building, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. I thought they would all be here, but there is only one of them, Evan muttered with a frown on his face. Knowing their rotten personalities, I'm sure they are not helping the people of the city to quell the chaos. Does this mean that they also ran away? Evan thought about the 3 people who were not inside the building, but after thinking about them for a few seconds, he shrugged his shoulders and dived down from the top of the building. Instead of thinking about where they are, I should just ask the person who is still inside the building. While falling down, Evan activated the invisibility effect of the Shadow Walk skill and became invisible. Just before his body hit the ground, he used gravity manipulation skill and slowed down his falling speed, landing perfectly on the ground. After landing, Evan went inside the building and arrived on one of the middle floors of the building using the elevator. He walked in the direction of one of the office rooms located on the floor and soon arrived in front of a closed door. He stretched out his hand to knock on the door, but just before knocking on the door, something clicked in his mind and Evan pulled back his hand. Since the person I am going to meet is not a good chicken, There is no need for me to act like a gentleman, Evan thought, and kicked the door like an FBI officer who would invade your home if you are a lolicon. Bang! With a loud bang, the door of the room was sent flying like it had been hit by a train, and crashed against the office wall. Who? Just as the door was blasted away, a woman who was inside the office room shouted in a startled voice. Evan stopped using the invisibility effect of the shadow walk skill, and walked into the office room. When the woman saw Evan entering the office room, her face turned pale. Including Ronan, there were a total of 5 vice presidents in the main branch of the Hunter Association, and the woman in front of Evan was one of them. Before killing Ronan in Naflium City, Evan had used the soul search skill on him, and found out that the other 4 vice presidents of the Hunter Association were also closely connected to the Dark Guild. Evan was not surprised after knowing those 4 were also working for the Dark Guild, because he knew that Natasha, the current president of the Hunter Association, was actually Nate. Since the president was working for the Dark Guild, it was easy to guess that the vice presidents were the same. The name of the woman in front of Evan was Zoya, and she was an A+ rank hunter. Although Zoya was in her mid-40s, she was still quite beautiful. Most of the men would definitely feel attracted towards her because of her perfect hourglass body and mature charm. But Evan is not just any man. He is a true lady killer, and as a true lady killer, the first thought that came into his mind after seeing her was to kill the lady and turn her into a shadow undead. But after remembering that his shadow army is already full, Evan erased the thought of turning the beauty in front of him into a shadow undead. Instead of turning her into a shadow undead, Evan chose the second best option. "What are you doing?" quote. Zoya was scared after seeing Evan and wanted to escape from there, but before she could find a way to escape, Evan appeared in front of her like a ghost, his face just a few centimeters away from her face. "Don't tell me he is going to." Zoya's face turned red, and strange thoughts flashed inside her mind, seeing Evan's face was so close to her. But before her thoughts could form a full scenario inside her mind, she heard 2 ominous words that sent a chill running down her spine. "Soul search." "Ugh!" Zoya cried out in pain and felt her soul was being eaten by something, along with her face that was already red because of thoughts that were running inside her mind a moment ago. Her eyes also turned bloodshot, and she dropped to the ground while still crying. After a few seconds, a small black dot came out of Zoya's body and went inside Evan's head. The moment the small black dot went inside his head, different kinds of information started to appear in Evan's mind. Evan closed his eyes and filtered out the useful information he wanted to know from the useless one. In less than 1 minute, Evan filtered the useful information and found out what he was looking for. "So that's how it is, huh?" Evan muttered in a slightly cold voice. It turned out that after escaping from the wilderness, Nate immediately came back to the association building. After coming back, he called the 3 other vice presidents of the association who recently reached S rank, and along with them ran away to the Tower of Ascension, so that they could escape to Utopia. Zoya wasn't able to go with them because she was an A+ rank hunter, and couldn't use the tower, so she had no choice but to stay here. After Nate and the others escaped, she also wanted to run away somewhere else to hide for the time being. But before she could escape, the mental energy waves from the dungeon assaulted the city, and she was also influenced by them, and wasn't able to run away. She came back to her senses just a few minutes ago, and was thinking about running away. But to her dismay, Evan arrived here just before she could escape. They went towards the Tower of Ascension a few hours ago, and Nate can use Space Element, so there is no point going after them now. Evan muttered inside lightly. He looked at Zoya, who was twitching on the ground due to pain, and his expressions became weird. "Why is her face red?" he muttered in a strange voice. "Don't tell me she is and is feeling good because of the pain caused by the soul search skill." Evan looked at Zoya for a few seconds before he pointed one of his fingers in her direction. "Shadow bullet," he said, and a bullet pierced Zoya's head, ending her life. "Rest in hell, woman," he said after killing Zoya and left the building. After leaving the building, Evan flapped his shadow wings and disappeared from there. Chapter 636. So it is finally time, huh? Evan muttered, looking at the bright blue sky. It is been 6 months since his fight against Clone. Evan returned to a straight city 6 months ago after resolving the mess in Central City. After solving the central city problem, Evan could have gone directly to Utopia using the Tower of Ascension. But before going to Utopia, he wanted to do one more thing. During his battle against Clone, Evan realized that he needed to learn how to use his physical body properly. Due to his Monarch Core and mutated Prime Core, his physical abilities are far stronger than anyone else's. Although his physical strength is far stronger than anyone else, he never learned how to use it properly. It was not that he did not want to learn how to use it properly. He always wanted to make some time and learn some martial arts or something, so that he could use his physical abilities to their maximum limits. But the problem was that after unlocking his Monarch physique, he had always been running all around because of different kinds of matters. Not only that, due to his Monarch Core, Evan never had to worry about stabilizing his cores, which led him to keep increasing the rank of his cores every few days. Because of this, even if he had made some time to learn how to use his physical body properly, it would have been useless, because his physical body was changing every few days, due to the rapid change in the rank of his cores. But now that both of his cores reached S rank and he couldn't increase their rank anymore, it was the best time for him to finally learn some martial arts. In these 6 months, Evan spent most of his time learning martial arts. Before he started learning martial arts, Evan thought he would have to ask Sebastian to introduce someone good to him who could help him in this regard. But it turned out there was no need for him to ask Sebastian, because there was already someone in his shadow army who was far better than any other fighting instructor of Aurora World. I can't believe Elijah turned into a freak after reaching S rank, Evan muttered as he flew in the direction of the Tower of Ascension. He doesn't know what happened, but after reaching S rank, Elijah started challenging other shadow undeads to fight against her from time to time. It is like she turned into a fighting freak who couldn't sleep at night without beating a few people. Evan watched a few of her fights against his shadow undeads, and after watching her fights, there was only one thought that came into his mind. She is a pro when it comes to beating down the people. Elijah was already quite good at fighting even before she reached S rank, but after reaching S rank, it is like she received some kind of enlightenment from the heavens, and her fighting techniques reached a completely different level. She even challenged Evan for a match, and although Evan's physical strength was far higher than her, he was still beaten to the ground by her. Of course, neither of them used any skills, otherwise the result would have been different. But just the fact that she was able to beat him despite the huge difference in their physical strength was enough for Evan to worship her as his master. Since the moment Elijah started to teach Evan, her name also changed. Now the members of the Shadow Army call her Elijah Sensei. Other than learning the martial arts from Elijah, Evan used this time to increase his knowledge of void energy as well. Current knowledge of the conceptual energy of void, 7.62%. Most of the time Evan trained inside the dungeon with Elijah, which is why around 18% of his total mana had already turned into world essence, and Evan turned 7.62% of that world essence into the conceptual energy of void. According to Asher, once I turn 25% of my world essence into conceptual energy, I will be able to use domain, Evan muttered, and his lips curled upwards slightly. I am still an S ranker, but I have already turned around 8% of my world essence into the conceptual energy, he said, and flapped his shadow wings with even more power. At least I won't have to start from the very bottom after going to Utopia. Name, Evan. Rank, S. Monarch Core rank, S. Bloodline, Doombringer, partially awakened. Strength, S. Agility, S. Mana, S. World Essence, E+. Stamina, S. Intelligence, S. Luck, A. Charm, S. Shadow Energy, S. Current understanding of the conceptual energy of void, 7.62%. Skills, Shadow Walk, Shadow Storage, Dimensional Shadow Bullet, Ice Chains, Wind Manipulation, Mind Suppression, Shadow Shrouding Wings, Temporal Velocity, Energy Devouring, Thunder Tempest, Flicker Step, Sonic Resonance, Ember Vitality, Regeneration, Mid-Level Poison Resistance, Bloodlust, Death Ring, Ice Spear, Wind Walk, Summon Lick, Soul Beacon, Soul Severance, Fireball, Blinding Light, Lightning Arrow, Gaze of Monarch, Psychic Soul Realm. Physique, Shadow Monarch Physique. Title, Rule Breaker, Ruler of the Shadow Realm, the Cursed One. Class, Shadow Necromancer. Class skills: Shadow Resurrection, Shadow Save, Shadow Senses, Shadow Possession, Shadow Nails, Death Transfer, Growth Link, Soul Absorption, Soul Fusion, Shadow Clone. Authorities: Master of Shadows. While flying, Evan glanced at his status window for a moment and nodded his head in satisfaction. There was just a single Tower of Ascension in the entire Aurora world, and it was quite far away from the Estrate City. Evan could have taken a flight to go there, but he was too lazy to use a plane. His current flying speed was far higher than any plane, and even if he ran out of stamina while flying and needed to rest, he could use Bone Dragon, which is also faster than planes. 5 days after leaving Estrate City, Evan finally saw a tower on the horizon that was so high that it seemed as if it was piercing the sky. So this is the Tower of Ascension, huh? Evan muttered and flapped his wings even faster. Chapter 637. The 1,000-kilometer area around the Tower of Ascension is a special place. This 1,000-kilometer expanse is filled with the strange power of the Tower of Ascension that allows only S-rankers to move forward, and once an S-ranker enters the area filled with the power of the Tower of Ascension, he or she will not be able to come back from that area. In other words, once an S-ranker enters within 1,000 kilometers of the area of the Tower of Ascension, his only options would be to either enter the Tower of Ascension and go to Utopia, or remain in the area filled with the power of the Tower of Ascension until he dies. Not much is known about what is in the area of 1,000 kilometers around the Tower of Ascension, because this area is filled with a magic fog, and everyone who enters this area never comes back. According to Sebastian, other than humans, monsters who reached S rank can also use the Tower of Ascension, so there is a possibility that I will have to face a bunch of S rank monsters here. Evan muttered and stopped flying forward when he noticed an area filled with fog in front of him. So this is the magical fog Sebastian told me about, Evan muttered after stopping, and tried to probe the foggy area using his spiritual senses. And not to his surprise, he couldn't scan the area filled with the fog using his spiritual senses. In addition to telling me about the monsters, Sebastian also said that within this foggy area, there may be a small town built by S-rankers who did not use the Tower of Ascension after entering this area and decided to stay here instead, Evan said, and took a deep breath. If there really is a town inside this foggy area, then I can get some information from there about what I will have to face after entering the Tower of Ascension, he thought inwardly, and finally took a step forward, entering the area filled with the fog. The moment Evan entered the fog-filled area, he felt the world around him spin for a moment, and thud. He fell face first to the ground. Damn it, Evan cursed in a low voice and tried to stand up. But even after standing up, his head continued to spin for a few more seconds, and he couldn't focus on anything. Around 10 seconds later, Evan finally regained his senses and looked around him. When he looked around him, Evan saw he was in a lush green forest that was filled with life. Colorful flowers, giant trees and different kinds of plants were growing everywhere, and he could even detect the aura of a few low-level monsters who ranged from F rank to E+ rank. What is this place? Evan muttered in confusion and looked behind him. When he looked behind, Evan didn't see the foggy area. Instead, he saw the same forest that was in front of him. Soon Evan noticed another thing, and his expression once again changed. The surroundings here are filled with world essence instead of mana, he muttered in a shocked voice. Don't tell me I am already in Utopia. After finding his surroundings were filled with world essence, Evan scanned his body, but noticed his mana was not changing into the world essence. Am I really in Utopia? After seeing that his mana was not turning into the world essence, he asked himself in a confused tone and used the shadow wings to take to the blue sky so that he could see across the forest. Whoosh! Like a bullet, he tore through the forest and arrived high in the sky. After arriving high in the sky, Evan finally received his answer. So I'm not in Utopia. Huh, he said in a low voice when he saw a giant black tower a few hundred kilometers away from him. The tower was piercing through the sky, and even though Evan was far away from it, he could still feel a strange power that the tower was emitting from time to time. Since I can still see the Tower of Ascension, then this means it is not Utopia, Evan said to himself and scratched the back of his head. If this is not Utopia, then what is this place? Suddenly Evan felt something and looked around him with narrowed eyes. Why do I feel like someone is watching me? He used his spiritual senses to scan his surroundings, But Evan did not find anyone even after scanning his surroundings. Although Evan did not find anyone, he could still feel that someone was looking at him. Since I can't find this person, then it means he or she is far stronger than me. Evan's expression turned serious when he realized this, and he started to fly away from there using his agility. But even after flying for 10 minutes, Evan could still feel the same gaze on him. Hey stalker, if you have something to say then come out and say it. Stop acting like a coward. Evan stopped when he wasn't able to get rid of the person who was looking at him, and shouted in a cold voice. He waited for a few minutes after calling out the person, but even after 5 minutes, no one showed up. Damn it! What the hell this stalker wants? Evan said in a frustrated voice when the person who was looking at him didn't show up in front of him. He used his spiritual senses once again, and tried his best to find the person who was looking at him. After using his spiritual senses again and again, Evan finally noticed something, and his expression turned strange. Why do I feel like this person is looking at me, but at the same time not looking at me? He said to himself with a confused look on his face. Just as Evan was going mad because of not being able to understand what was happening, something clicked in his mind. Looking at me but not looking at me, Evan muttered inwardly and thought about his shadow undeads. Could it be this person can sense my shadow undeads who are inside my shadow storage? Evan thought, and his expression turned even more serious. If this person can even detect my shadow undeads, then he is definitely not a normal person. Evan looked inside his shadow storage to see if there was anything wrong there. On the first look, he didn't find anything wrong with his shadow storage, but suddenly he noticed Hana was behaving strangely. Through his connection with her, he could feel she was becoming restless for some reason. What's wrong with her? Evan immediately took out Hana from his shadow storage to check what was wrong with her, but to his surprise, the moment he took out Hana from the shadow storage, the gaze he was feeling on him disappeared. Instead, now he could feel that gaze was locked on Hana. Before Evan could understand what was happening, Hana went back into his shadow storage on her own, like she was trying to hide herself from something, and the gaze that he had been feeling all this time finally disappeared. What the F*** is going on here? Evan was completely stunned because of the strange thing that just happened and looked at Hana once again. When he looked at her, Evan noticed she wasn't feeling restless anymore, and was sitting inside his shadow storage with a relaxed look on her face. Is Hana somehow related to this place? Evan couldn't help but think after seeing what just happened. He still didn't know many things about Hana, her powerful psychic abilities and the fact that he couldn't see her skills, even using the second effect of the growth link skill. There were too many strange things about her. I will talk to Hana later. For now, I should get out of here before that stalker comes back, Evan thought, and flew in the direction of the Tower of Ascension. Evan continued to fly for 1.5 hours. But even after flying for 1.5 hours, he was not able to reach the Tower of Ascension. Damn it, from the distance it looks like the tower is just a few hundred kilometers away. But in reality, it is a few thousand kilometers away. Evan cursed inwardly, and flapped his wings with even more speed. Suddenly, he noticed something and stopped flying forward. So there is really a city in this place, Evan said after stopping as he looked at a giant city in front of him. Chapter 638. What the F*** is this place? Evan thought to himself as he walked around the city with an astonished look on his face. Fresh purple dew grass for those who are seeking a vibrant escape. Quality purple dew grass, my friends. Quality purple dew grass. Come and take 10 stalks of purple dew grass for the price of only 1 essence stone. Freshly harvested profound cherry fruits. Limited stocks. Quote, make your night more colorful. Buy this rising worm pill and you quote. After entering the city, Evan noticed that people were selling strange things. Although the items people were selling were strange, what shocked Evan the most was not the items, but the people who were selling them. Are these people monsters who took human forms? Evan thought when he saw a man with wolf ears selling rising worm pills. Other than the wolf-eared man, he also noticed some people with the features of birds, some people with the features of dogs, and many more. Other than them, he noticed a few humans as well, and just like these people, they were also selling different kinds of things. The only thing Evan saw in common with all of them was that they were all S-rankers. Is this some kind of market? Evan thought as he moved around the city. After wandering around the city for about an hour, Evan came across a cafe-like place. and noticed that most of the people inside the cafe were actually humans. Should I go there to get some information? Evan thought and hesitated a little. After wandering around the city, he learns that the currency the people here use is called Essence Stone, and currently, he does not have any Essence Stone. With my current abilities, doing a dine and dash should be a piece of cake, Evan said to himself after a moment, and dropped a soul beacon far away from the cafe, so that he could use soul beacon skill in order to perform a dine and dash act. After dropping the soul beacon, Evan walked towards the cafe with a confident look on his face. When he opened the door, the bell hanging outside the cafe rang, making a cool and pleasant sound. It was noontime, so the cafe was mostly full. Evan looked around for a bit and finally found an empty seat. After finding the seat, Evan sat down and glanced at the people who were present in the cafe. All of these people are also S-rank, as Evan thought, and picked up the menu. He did not bother to look at the names of the dishes, and directly decided to order the most expensive dish that was present on the menu. Since I am not going to pay, I might as well try the most expensive dish. This is what Evan thought after looking at the menu. Soon a male waiter who looks to be in his mid-20s came to take Evan's order. 2 Inferno Harpy sandwiches, please. The hands of the waiter shook for a moment when he heard Evan's order, and he nearly dropped the handbook he was holding. Even the people who were sitting around Evan stopped eating and looked at him with their eyes wide open. Why are they looking at me like that? Evan's expression remained indifferent on the outside, but inside he started sweating buckets when he noticed the strange reactions of the people. Right away. Please wait for a moment. The waiter finally came back to his senses after a few seconds, and swiftly moved in the direction of the kitchen. Who is this guy? I don't know, but since he ordered 2 Inferno Harpy sandwiches that cost 200 Essence Stones, he must be someone from the 4 Great Clans. Even people from the 4 Great Clans wouldn't spend 200 Essence Stones on a meal. He's quite handsome, so he might be Moonspider's boy toy. SHHHH. Keep your mouth shut. If anyone hears, you'll lose your head. What the FU*K are these bastards talking about? Evan was baffled when he heard people calling him a boy toy. Although they were talking in a very low voice, he was still able to hear them because of his excellent hearing. They just said something about 4 Great Clans. What the hell are these 4 Great Clans? And most importantly, Evan narrowed his eyes and rubbed his chin. Who is this Moonspider? Evan continued to hear people's conversation while waiting for his order. It seems the sandwiches I ordered are not normal, he thought, when the waiter did not bring his order even after 20 minutes. Finally, half an hour later, Evan saw the waiter coming towards him with 2 medium-sized sandwiches. The sandwiches were dark red in color, and small particles of fire were swirling around them, giving them a unique look. When the waiter placed the sandwiches in front of him and Evan looked at them more closely, he couldn't help but feel shocked. I can feel faint traces of conceptual energy coming out from these sandwiches. Please enjoy your meal. The waiter left from there after placing the sandwiches. The people who were present in the cafe were all looking at the sandwiches with eyes full of desire. Evan could feel their passionate gazes on the sandwiches, but he did not care about them, and picked up one sandwich. After picking up the sandwich, he took a bite from it. And the moment he took a bite from the sandwich, and its taste exploded into his mouth, Evan's eyes widened in disbelief. This taste is so FU*King ordinary, Evan thought with a baffled look on his face. The taste of the sandwich was actually similar to a normal chicken sandwich. Just when he was about to show a middle finger to the chef of the cafe, some broken pieces of knowledge appeared in his mind. Evan was stunned when felt this, and tried to focus his mind on the pieces of knowledge that were coming into his mind. After a few seconds, Evan sorted out the knowledge that appeared in his mind, and he was quite shocked. This sandwich can actually help people understand the mysteries of the fire element, and allows them to turn their world essence into the conceptual energy of fire, Evan thought inwardly, and looked at the sandwich with a completely different look on his face. He took another bite of the sandwich and fell into deep thought. Now that I look at these people closely, I can feel that's similar to me. Some of them also have a small amount of world essence inside their bodies, Evan thought, and glanced at the people who were sitting in the cafe from the corner of his eye. Since there are people with the world essence inside their bodies, I am sure there must be some core evolers as well in this place. Evan gulped down the sandwich and started sweating. If there are really core evolvers in this place, then it won't be easy for me to carry out my dine and dash plan. Evan looked at the people who were sitting around him and his eyes flashed. Most of the people were still looking at his sandwich with greed-filled eyes, and many of them were definitely thinking about robbing his sandwich. It is time to start my real plan. Seeing their greed-filled eyes, Evan smirked inwardly, and his eyes stopped on a middle-aged man who was sitting alone just 2 tables away from him. Chapter 639. What is your name, brother? Evan asked with a friendly smile on his face. Malak, a middle-aged man said with drool trickling down from his mouth. What can I do for you, brother? He asked while keeping his eyes fixed on one of the untouched sandwiches on the table. It's nothing, brother Malak. I was just bored and you seemed an interesting person, so I called you here to have a nice chat. Evan said and pushed the untouched Inferno Harpy sandwich toward Malak. Let's talk while eating. The eyes of the people who were paying attention to Evan turned red from jealousy when they saw Evan giving the sandwich to Malak. Malak's body also froze because of shock, and he looked at Evan with his eyes wide open. Why you are giving this to me? He asked in a trembling voice. What's wrong, brother? Could it be that this sandwich is not to your liking? Evan asked while raising an eyebrow. No, I love this sandwich. Hearing what Evan said, Malak immediately said and held the sandwich, as if he was afraid that Evan would take it back. That's a relief then. Evan sighed in relief when he heard Malak and showed him a friendly smile once again. Go on, brother, you can eat first before we talk. Hearing Evan's words, Malak swallowed his saliva and slowly ate a large piece of the sandwich. F*** my cursed life. Why did he choose this middle-aged man? If he had chosen me, I would have even warmed his bed tonight. Brother, I didn't know you had this kind of fetish. Fuck the fetish, as long as you can become strong, who cares about such trivial things? Evan's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard what people were talking about. He shook his head inwardly and focused back on Malak, who closed his eyes after eating the sandwich. It took Malak 1 whole hour to finish the sandwich and get some knowledge about the fire element. After finishing everything, Malak showed an excited expression and looked at Evan. Thank you for the treat, brother. Forgive me, but can you tell me your name? I forgot to ask you earlier. Don't worry about it, brother, Evan said, and created a barrier around them to isolate their voices. Now that you've eaten, let's talk. Malak was surprised when he saw the barrier around them, but he didn't care too much about it, and said with a smile on his face, You can ask me anything you want, brother. Evan nodded his head hearing Malak and opened his mouth. What is this place? Huh? Malak looked at Evan in confusion after hearing his question, but not even a second later, something clicked in his mind and the smile on his face disappeared. He took a few deep breaths and asked in a trembling voice, Brother, by any chance did you just arrive here from your world because you wanted to use the Tower of Ascension? Evan didn't say anything hearing Malak and just showed him a smile. Brother, you are joking with me, right? Tell me you have enough essence stones to pay for the sandwiches you had ordered. Evan once again didn't say anything, and continued to maintain the same smile on his face. Seeing the smile on Evan's face, it was the moment when Malak realized he was ***ed up. Damn you bastard. If you are new here and don't have the essence stones, then why did you order those sandwiches? And most importantly, why did you involve me in your mess? Malak slammed the table and shouted in an enraged voice. Although people could see Malak was angry, they couldn't hear him because of the barrier Evan created around them. Evan stayed calm even in front of Malak's enraged self and said in a calm voice, I order those sandwiches because I am planning to dine and dash. And as for why I gave that sandwich to you, he looked at Malak and smiled slightly. It was because you were looking at my sandwiches with wolf-like eyes, and I was afraid that I would get a stomach ache if I didn't share them with you. Malak's face turned red from anger, and his breathing quickened when he heard Evan. He looked at Evan like he wanted to rip him apart, but after a few seconds, he slumped down on the chair and covered his face. I am dead. I survived here for 2 years and 10 months, and just when I was about to leave this damn place, Malak muttered with a dead look on his face. Evan narrowed his eyes when he heard Malak. Hey brother, what do you mean by you were about to leave from here? You you still have the audacity to call me brother when you just framed me, Malak shouted with a red face, and nearly punched Evan. Now, you don't have to act like this, Evan said, and tried to calm down Malak. Actually, You don't have to worry too much because I have a way to bring you out of here. Malak sneered when he heard Evan. You are just an S-ranker like me. What can you do here? You are new here so you don't know, but this cafe belongs to the Frostfall Alliance, which is one of the 4 great clans, and the person in charge of this cafe is a rank 1 evolver, a whole level above S rank, and he can kill the likes of us with just a snap of his finger. Do you think you can escape from here under his supervision? So there are really core evolvers in this place, Evan thought inwardly, and fell into deep in thoughts. Wait, Malak suddenly stood up and looked at Evan with a serious face. When did you enter the city? Evan was confused when he saw Malak's serious face, but he replied honestly, around 2.5 hours ago. Damn it. Did you wander around the city after entering? Malak once again asked, and Evan nodded his head in an obvious manner. You need to get quote. Before Malak could finish speaking, the chime of the bell rang, and the door of the cafe opened. Malak looked in the direction of the door and sighed loudly. They are already here. Evan followed Malak's gaze and saw 3 orcs coming in their direction. Among 2 orcs were S-rankers, and the orc who was in the lead was a rank 1 core evolver. Although he is a core evolver, he is far weaker than Asher, Evan thought, when he felt the aura around the orc who was coming towards him. Listen to me. They are from the Warlord Gang, which is one of the 4 great clans similar to the Frostfall Alliance. If you don't want to become a working slave, make sure you stay away from them. Suddenly Evan received a telepathic message from Malak, and noticed his face was a bit pale. The 3 orcs stopped just in front of Evan's table and looked at him like they were looking at a meat on sale. When the rank 1 orc noticed the half-eaten Inferno Harpy sandwich in front of Evan, he smirked and picked it up without saying anything. Don't do anything. Evan was about to stop the orc, but he received another telepathic message from Malak. After picking up the sandwich, the orc ate it in one go, and nodded his head in satisfaction. You, come with us. After eating the sandwich, the orc looked at Evan and said in an ordering voice, Hey Malak, let me ask you one thing. Evan took a deep breath and asked Malak using the telepathy skill, what is the highest level a person can reach in this place? Malak was stunned when he heard Evan's voice, and he looked at him in confusion. Why apostrophe? Just answer my question. Peak of rank 1. The best you can reach in this place is the peak of rank 1 core evolver. So this place is really different from Utopia, Evan muttered in a low voice and stood up. Since there are only rank 1 core evolvers in this place, I don't need to worry too much about them. After standing up, he looked at the rank 1 orc and sighed internally. Although I can kill him here without much effort, it will definitely attract too much attention, and I will be in big trouble if the Warlord Gang behind him sends more rank 1 core evolvers to hunt me down, Evan thought, and looked around him to see if he could get out of the situation without getting involved in a fight. Suddenly, Evan noticed the waiter who had served him the sandwiches, and an idea came into his mind. Since this place is under the control of the Frostfall Alliance, Evan muttered inwardly, and his lips curved upwards slightly. Chapter 640. Hey waiter, what the hell is going on here? A pig just entered the cafe and ate my sandwich, and you are just standing there doing nothing. What kind of half-baked customer service is this? Evan said while looking at the waiter who was watching everything from the sidelines. Huh! The waiter was stunned when Evan spoke to him and started to sweat buckets. Similar to other people, the waiter was also an S-ranker, and just by looking at the orc who was a rank 1 core evolver, the waiter felt his legs turning numb. Why is this bastard dragging me in this mess? The waiter cursed inwardly, and his body shook a little because of fear. You see this pig, Evan said to the orc when he saw the waiter was shaking. This brother is so angry that his entire body is shaking because of anger. You better pay me the money for that sandwich, otherwise this righteous looking big brother will break some of your bones, and will throw you out of the cafe for disturbing the customers. Break some of my bones? The orc exhaled a large amount of steam from his nostrils, and looked at the waiter with anger-filled eyes. You want to break my bones? Orcs are really simple muscle heads, Evan said inwardly, when he saw the orc believed in his words so easily. And no, I never said anything like that. Why would I break your bones? The waiter said in a trembling voice and looked at Evan like he was looking at his biggest enemy. Of course, why would this big brother break your bones? You just troubled his customers, so to appease his customers' anger, he will directly cut off your head. Evan ignored the way the waiter was looking at him and said to the orc with a sneer on his face, "Orc, you better tell him about your wife before he kills you, so that he can help you keep her bed warm after your death." The face of the waiter turned pale when he heard Evan, and Malak and other people also looked at him like they were looking at a devil. You want to sleep with my wife?" The orc's eyes turned bloodshot when he heard Evan, and he looked at the waiter like he was looking at a dead man. "You dare to have ideas about my beautiful Lulu?" The legs of the waiter started to tremble, and he dropped to the ground with a horrified look on his face. I quote, he wanted to speak, but the orc had locked down his aura on him, so the waiter wasn't able to speak anything. "Do you think you can do whatever you want here?" Evan once again said in a loud voice when the orc locked down his aura on the waiter. "This is the place that belongs to Frostfall Alliance, and this brother is working for them. Do you think you can harm someone from the Frostfall Alliances in their own territory?" "What dogsh *T Frostfall Alliance? Since they dared to think about my Lulu, I will kill every single one of them." The orc roared like a wild beast and took a step towards the waiter, who was on the verge of wetting his pants. "Let me see, how are you going to kill him and destroy the Frostfall Alliance?" The moment the orc took a step forward, a calm but cold voice rang out, and a man wearing a white robe appeared right beside the waiter who was on the ground. "So he finally decided to show up, huh?" Evan said inwardly and closely looked at the man who just appeared. The man was looking in his mid-30s and had silver white hair. His handsome face was ice cold, and the aura around him was a little stronger than the rank 1 orc. "Julius, don't think you can save this guy. How dare he think about my Lulu? Today I will definitely cut him into 2,000 pieces." The orc said in a voice full of hatred. The waiter nearly showed a middle finger to the orc when he heard him. "Why the *K I will think about your so-called Lulu. Instead of sleeping with an orc, I would rather preserve my innocence for the rest of my life," the waiter said inwardly with tears trickling down from his eyes. Even Julius facepalmed and looked at the orc like he was looking at an idiot. He glanced in Evan's direction from the corner of his eyes and noticed he was standing there with an innocent expression on his face. "These orcs are *King morons." That guy turned the situation into a dispute between the Frostfall Alliance and the Warlord Gang. "Now if I don't stop these morons, it will definitely affect the reputation of the Frostfall Alliance." Julius thought inwardly and took a deep breath. "Grunk, I will say it just one time. Leave from here or I will send an official complaint to the Warlord Gang," Julius said in an ice-cold voice. "I don't need to tell you what will happen to you and your Lulu. Once they find out you are trying to start a war between my Frostfall Alliance and your Warlord Gang, Grunk's expression changed when he heard Julius. "Do you really want to do this?" he asked Julius while gritting his teeth. Julius didn't say anything hearing Grunk, and continued to look at him with the same cold expression on his face. "Good, I won't forget what happened today," Grunk said after seeing Julius's expression and turned around to leave. "You come with me," Grunk said to Evan with bloodshot eyes after turning around. "You can leave on your own. He is a customer of my cafe, and it's my responsibility to ensure his safety while he is here." Grunk clenched his fist when he heard Julius, but he did not argue with him and left the cafe. Thank you, sir," the waiter said to Julius with tear-filled eyes when Grunk left the cafe. He stood up from the ground and bowed toward him with a grateful look on his face. Julius just nodded his head and asked the waiter to go back to his work. "K you bastard." Before leaving, the waiter showed a middle finger to Evan and cursed him. Evan ignored the waiter and looked at Julius, who was now looking at him with a cold look on his face. "Brother Malak, today is your child's birthday, right? We still need to buy a gift for him, so we should leave as well," Evan suddenly said to Malak and turned around to leave. "What is this bastard talking about?" Malak was baffled inwardly, but he did not show any kind of reaction and followed after Evan. "Stop, both of you." Before Malak and Evan could leave, they heard Julius's cold voice. "You are going to leave without paying." Malak wanted to cry when he heard Julius. "I should have checked my fortune before leaving the home today," he thought, and looked at Julius, along with Evan. "You must be joking, kind sir. If you want payment, you should have asked that pig who left earlier. After all, he was the one who ate the sandwich," Evan said, and narrowed his eyes. "You don't want us to pay for someone else's food, right? You ordered 2 sandwiches and let's say Grunk ate one of them. Then what about the second one?" Julius said with the same expression on his face. Don't you think you should at least pay for that one? Evan looked at Malak when he heard Julius, and showed him a smile that was literally saying you are now on your own, brother. Do your best to survive. Tears started to stream down from Malak's eyes, and he regretted that he ate that sandwich earlier. Half of my lifelong savings, Malak said inwardly, and handed down a storage ring to Julius with trembling hands. The moment Julius took the storage ring from his hand, sob, Malak started sobbing. Julius's mouth couldn't help but twitch seeing Malak crying like a baby, and he looked at Evan. Don't worry about him. Today is brother Malak's son's birthday, so he is feeling a little emotional, Evan said when he saw Julius was looking at him and started dragging Malak outside. Birthday my ass, Julius said inwardly and took a deep breath. I am going to let you off this time because you are also a human just like me, and you are new here. Evan heard Julius's voice just before he left the cafe. But if you try to cause trouble here once again, I will make you regret this. Evan paused for a moment when he heard Julius and left the cafe without saying anything. Sob. Malak continued to cry even after leaving the cafe, and his eyes started to turn hollow, like he had lost the will to live on. Evan sighed when he saw this and patted Malak's shoulder. Stop crying. I promise you that at the end of the day, I will return you double the amount of essence stones you lost just now. Sob. The speed at which Malak was crying increased by twofold when he heard Evan. Evan sighed again when he saw this. He helped Malak to sit on a street corner like a beggar, and placed a bowl in front of him. Just wait here for a few minutes. I will soon bring back your essence stones, he said after placing the bowl in front of Malak, and disappeared from there. Chapter 641. Evan hovered high in the sky while using the invisibility effect of Shadow Walk skill, and looked at Grunk and two other orcs, who had just left the cafe a few minutes ago. I didn't want to use the soul search skill on people for no reason, just to get information about this place, but since this guy presented himself to me, it would be rude of me to ignore him, Evan muttered, and used the second effect of Growth Link skill to take Illusion's skill Chameleon Illusion to change his appearance. When Grunk asked Evan to come with him before leaving the cafe and Julius stopped him, Evan clearly felt Grunk's killing intent towards him. Although Evan wasn't sure what was going on, he guessed that Grunk and the others already knew he was new in this place, and had come to the cafe with ill intentions towards him. Once I use Soul Search skill on him, everything will become clear, Evan thought inwardly, and dived down from the sky. Just before hitting the ground, he slowed down his speed and landed perfectly. After landing, Evan stopped using the invisibility effect of the Growth Link skill, and bolted in the direction of Grunk and the two other orcs. I will make that Julius bastard pay for the humiliation I suffered today, Grunk said in a hate-filled voice, as he walked with the two orcs. Because of him we also lost our chance to catch that human. If we had caught that human, we would have definitely received a reward for capturing another worker for the gang, the S-rank orc grumbled when he heard Grunk. That human got here just a few hours ago. We will have plenty of chances to catch him once he leaves the cafe, Grunk said, and his eyes turned cold. Once I capture him, the first thing I will do is take out my anger on him, and make sure he becomes an obedient worker for our gang. You are right, Master Grunk. That guy dare quote. Bang. You ** King Pig. How dare you stand in my way? The S-rank orc wanted to bootlick Grunk, but before he could finish his bootlicking sentence, someone punched him in the back of the head, making him stumble down to the ground. Grunk and the orcs were stunned when someone attacked them, and they looked behind them with shocked expressions on their faces. The people who were walking on the road were also shocked to see that someone attacked the people of the Warlord Gang, and started to look in their direction with a look of interest on their faces. Who are you? Grunk and the two orcs felt a chill running down their spines for a moment when they turned around and saw the face of the man who had just attacked them. The man's face was filled with deep black scars, and his eyes were deep red in color. Along with his scary face and muscular build, the man was looking like the boss of a gangster gang. Why are you still standing in my way, you pigs? Step aside before I rip all of you apart. The man didn't answer Grunk and said while taking a step forward. The man was obviously Evan, who used Illusion's skill to change his appearance. You bastard! Grunk soon came back to his senses, and his face turned red from anger when he heard Evan's words. His aura of rank 1 core revolver burst forth, and he looked at Evan like he was looking at a dead man. Rank 1 core evolver Evan showed a terrified expression when he felt Grunk's aura and backed away from the orcs with a shocked look on his face. A cruel smile appeared on Grunk's face when he saw this, and he pressed down his aura on Evan. UMOTHER**user. I was already in a bad mood. Ain't you still dared to mess with me? Grunk said, and took a step forward in Evan's direction. Today I will set an example out of you so that no one will ever dare to mess with me. Grunk stretched out his hand after stopping in front of Evan and tried to grab his face using his large palm. But just before he could grab his face, Evan broke free from the restriction of his aura and backed away from him. Pig, I will definitely eat you in my breakfast once I become a rank 1 core evolver, Evan shouted after breaking free from the restrictions, and dashed away from there. Grunk's eyes turned bloodshot when he saw Evan running away from there, and he chased after him. Do you think you can run away from me? That human. The 2S rank orcs who were with Grunk was stunned because Evan's running speed was much faster than them, and they couldn't even follow his movements. They could only watch as Grunk and Evan disappeared from their sights in an instant. Forget it, Master Grunk is in a bad mood today. I don't think that human will be able to escape from him, one of the S-rank orcs said after a moment and shook his head. The second S-rank orc also nodded his head and looked in the direction where Evan and Grunk just ran. Grunk continued to chase after Evan for half an hour, and soon both of them left the city. This bastard. Grunk was extremely shocked because even though he was running at his full speed, he still wasn't able to catch Evan, who wasn't even a rank 1 core evolver. You useless pig, you will never be able to catch me with your turtle-like speed. Evan continued to provoke Grunk even while running away, so that he wouldn't stop chasing after him. Around 10 minutes later, they were about 500 kilometers away from the city. Once Evan confirmed that they were far away from the city, he stopped running and stood in the middle of an open area. When Grunk saw Evan stop running, he thought Evan was out of stamina and couldn't run anymore. While still moving in Evan's direction, Grunk pressed his feet to the ground and shot in his direction like a bullet. In an instant, he arrived right behind Evan whose back was facing him. Without wasting even a single second, he gathered his power around his fist and punched Evan's head. Rumble. The ground and the atmosphere of the surroundings trembled because of the tremendous power behind Grunk's fist. Die! Grunk roared like a wild beast, and his fist touched the backside of Evan's head. But the moment Grunk's fist touched Evan's head, Evan disappeared from the place he was standing. Grunk's expression changed when he saw this, and he tried to stop the momentum of his body. But before he could balance his body, bang! Someone kicked him from behind and sent him flying away like a broken kite. Boom! Grunk crashed 100 meters away from his initial position and spat out a mouthful of blood. F***K, he cursed when he felt the sharp pain coming from his backside and stood up with difficulty. After standing up, he turned back and looked at the person who had kicked him and saw Evan standing there with a cruel smile on his scarred face. Seeing the smile on Evan's face, a bad feeling started to grow in Grunk's heart, and his instincts warned him to run away from there. But before Grunk could run away, Evan lifted his hand and opened his mouth. Sonic barrier, he said, and an invisible sound barrier sealed off the space of the surrounding area. Chapter 642. You were pretending all this time so you could lure me out of the city, Grunk said in a cold voice when he felt the sonic barrier that Evan used to seal off the space around them. You're right. Unfortunately, you realized it too late, Evan said with a scary smile on his scarred face. Beads of cold sweat appeared on Grunk's forehead when he heard Evan, and he started to look around him with a careful look on his face. Evan's lips curved upwards when he saw this, and he said in a light voice, "Don't worry, there is no one other than the two of us. I don't need anyone's help to slaughter a pig like you." Grunk stopped looking around and narrowed his eyes when he heard Evan. He didn't believe Evan's words because even though he could tell that Evan was powerful, he did not believe that he would dare to fight against him alone. For now, my best option is to kill him as soon as possible and break this barrier, so that I can return back to the city using the return stone, Grunk muttered inwardly, and his aura started to increase. So he wants to kill me in a single move, so that he can escape from here before anyone else attacks him, Evan thought when he felt Grunk's rising aura and smiled lightly. Whoosh! Suddenly, drops of water started to fill the surroundings. Evan looked at Grunk and noticed the world essence around him was changing into water, and was gathering around his fist. Since he is going to use his strongest attack, it is a good chance for me to test out my self-created skill, Evan muttered and used temporal velocity skill. Time seemed to slow down in Evan's eyes as he watched Grunk gather all of his strength around his fist. Rumble. The surroundings around Grunk trembled as, along with the water, fist force also started to cover his entire arm. Grunk's muscles bulged out. He took a step forward and punched in Evan's direction. Roar! A roar of a wild beast resounded inside the sonic barrier, and a giant water serpent that was filled with Grunk's powerful fist force went towards Evan like a bullet train. Evan felt a powerful force locking down on his body, and for a moment, it became hard for me to breathe. The feeling was the same as when Nate used the ability bead on him. The only difference was that compared to the pressure of the ability bead, Grunk's attack's pressure was like a child's play to him. Even though the water serpent was coming in his direction at an incredible speed, Evan still closed his eyes and adjusted his breath. After seeing the power of the ability bead used by Nate, Evan realized that it was very difficult for him to counter its power without using the soul absorption skill. But using the soul absorption skill takes a huge toll on his body, as happened in the dungeon when he faced Clone. Evan wanted a powerful defensive skill or a skill that could help him withstand the impact of powerful attacks before going to Utopia, so that he could ensure his safety, and he received an opportunity when 5% of his world essence turned into the conceptual energy of void. When Evan's 5% world essence turned into conceptual energy of void, he entered into a state of enlightenment, where his understanding of void energy increased greatly. During the state of enlightenment, Evan created a skill based on his understanding of the void element. Unlike his other skills, the skill Evan created was a bit different. He can use his mana, world essence or shadow energy to activate his other skills. But the skill that Evan created can only be used with the help of the conceptual energy of void. Without the conceptual energy of void, Evan can't use this skill by consuming his mana, world essence or shadow energy. Currently, 7.62% of Evan's world essence has turned into the conceptual energy of void. This amount of conceptual energy was not high, but it should be enough to deal with an attack of this level, Evan muttered with his eyes closed, and slowly extended his right hand in front of him. When Grunk saw Evan's eyes were closed, his lips curved upwards, and a sneer appeared on his face. Closing your eyes won't help you to survive. Suddenly, the words Grunk was about to speak struck inside his mouth, and a horrified look appeared on his face. Just as the water serpent was about to hit Evan, his eyes snapped open, and a dark purple energy covered his entire right arm, which he had previously extended in front of him. The dark purple energy gathered around Evan's palm, and his eyes flashed with bright light. Void break, Evan said, and closed his palm like he was crushing something. The moment he closed his palm, the dark purple energy that Evan gathered in his hand scattered around him, and the next second, crack, crack, cracked. The space in front of Evan shattered, and a stable void rift that was 2 meters long and 2 meters wide opened in front of him. Whoosh! A powerful suction force erupted from the void rift, and the water serpent that was heading towards Evan was pulled inside it. Rumble! The void rift became unstable because of the powerful force of the water serpent and started to shake. Evan used his conceptual energy of void and tried his best to maintain the void rift. Because Evan was not experienced enough in using conceptual energy, he used up almost all of his void energy in just 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, the void rift completely swallowed the water serpent. The moment the water serpent was swallowed by the void rift, Evan stopped using the void energy, and the rift in front of him immediately closed. Evan's heart was beating like a war drum after the rift closed. Although Grunk's attack was weaker than the ability bead that Nate used, he still could not help but feel excited after knowing that he stopped such a powerful attack without any problem. I just created this skill recently, so I can still increase its power in the future, Evan thought inwardly, and took a step forward. Flicker step. Using the flicker step skill, Evan arrived in front of Grunk in an instant. Although Grunk was shocked to his core after seeing what had just happened, he still reacted in time and punched Evan the moment he arrived in front of him. Evan's expressions remained unchanged, seeing Grunk's punch. He just sidestepped a little and easily avoided Grunk's punch. After dodging Grunk's punch, Evan gathered mana around his fist, and before Grunk could pull back his hand, he struck Grunk's elbow, which was just a few centimeters above his hand. Crack! The sound of bone cracking rang out inside the sonic barrier, and Grunk's elbow broke down, rendering his arm completely useless. Arg! Grunk roared out in pain and tried to back away from Evan. But before he could back away, Evan took a step forward and arrived right in front of him. Energy gathered around Evan's hand, and he punched Grunk right in the middle of the stomach. Unlike his punches from 6 months ago, where he usually wasted most of the energy, Evan's current punch was completely different. The moment Evan's punch struck Grunk's stomach, all the air went out of Grunk's body. Some of his internal organs turned into a bloody mess, and his body leaned forward. Mano gathered around Evan's knee, and he struck his knee right at Grunk's face, who was leaning forward. Crunch! A crunching sound rang out and Grunk's skull cracked open, turning his vision red because of blood. Grunk felt the world around him spin, and even before he could understand what was happening, thud, he dropped to the ground and lost consciousness. In a matter of seconds, Evan completely crushed a rank 1 orc, who could easily kill tens of S-rankers without any problems. Evan's expressions remained the same even after Grunk lost consciousness. He looked at him for a few seconds and stretched out his hand. "Let's see, what is this place?" he muttered and grabbed Grunk's face. Soul Search. Chapter 643. Soul Search, Evan said, and a small black dot went inside Grunk's body. Arg! The moment the black dot went inside his body, Grunk was jolted awake, and an inhuman scream escaped from his mouth. Blood started to flow out from his eyes, and his heart nearly stopped beating. Evan watched Grunk without any expression on his face, and soon the black dot that went inside his body came out. After coming out, the black dot touched Evan's forehead and went inside his mind. Just as the black dot went inside his head, a large amount of information started to appear in his mind. Evan furrowed his eyebrows because he felt a mild headache due to the large amount of information that was coming into his mind. Using his high spiritual power, Evan sorted out the useful information, and in just half an hour, he got all the information that he wanted. After knowing where he was, Evan couldn't help but look at Grunk with narrowed eyes. Although Grunk was still alive, his condition was quite bad, especially after Evan used the Soul Search skill on him. Evan looked at Grunk for a few seconds before he pointed one of his fingers in his direction. The shadow energy inside his body moved, and soon a pitch-black bullet formed in front of his finger. Whoosh! He shot the bullet at Grunk, and the shadow bullet destroyed Grunk's brain, granting him an instant death. But as soon as Grunk died, something strange happened. The moment Grunk died, a strange energy covered his dead body, and in less than 1 second, his entire body turned into dust. Although Evan already knew what was happening, he was still quite shocked when he saw this. "There is not even the soul orb that I can absorb using soul absorption skill," Evan muttered in a low voice, and looked in the direction of the Tower of Ascension. He took a deep breath and picked up Grunk's storage ring from the ground. "After knowing there are rank 1 evolvers, I was thinking about turning some of the AS* holes into my shadow undeads. But it seems I can't create shadow undeads in this place," Evan muttered, after picking up the storage ring, and flew back into the direction of the city. According to information that he received after using the Soul Search, Evan knows this place is called the World Domain. The World Domain is the place where people of different worlds appear once they try to use the Tower of Ascension. Similar to Aurora World, there are many other different lower worlds as well. The Tower of Ascension that the people of the lower world see in their world is just a projection of the real Tower of Ascension that is located in this world domain. After reaching S rank, when someone enters the magic mist generated by the projection of the Tower of Ascension, they will be teleported here to the world domain where the real Tower of Ascension is located. After arriving in world domain, people can stay here only for 1 month before they will be forcefully expelled from here and will be sent inside the Tower of Ascension. During this 1 month, they can gather some resources that will be helpful for them once they go to Utopia. In other words, you can say that the world domain is the place where you can earn some of the pocket money, so that you won't have to become a beggar once you go to Utopia. Of course, if you don't want to stay here, you can use the Tower of Ascension immediately and leave from here. But using the Tower of Ascension is not an easy task, because it is under the control of people of the 4 great clans. Although people can stay here only for 1 month, there is a method that can allow people to stay here for a longer period of time, and that method is to sign a contract with one of the 4 great clans of the world domain. The people of the four great clans are actually the natives of the world domain. The four great clans are Frostfall Alliance, Warlord Gang, Moon Spider Nest and Phantom World. Frostfall Alliance is led by the native humans of the world domain. Warlord Gang is led by the native orcs. Moon Spider Nest is led by a monster called Moon Spider, and the Phantom World is led by native phantom cats of the world domain. According to information that Evan received after using the soul search skill, other than these fours, there are other great clans as well, but they are located in the different cities of the world domain. If Evan wanted to go to another city of the world domain, even with his current speed, it would take him at least 1 month, because the world domain is very big, and the distance between each city is simply vast. Generally speaking, as long as the people who enter the world domain to use the Tower of Ascension don't harm the natives of the four great clans, the people of the four great can't do anything against them. It is the rule of the world domain that the natives of this place can't harm the people who came here to use the Tower of Ascension unless they do something wrong. But the same can't be said for the people who signed the contract with the four great clans. The people who signed a contract with one of the four great clans in order to extend their stay period in the world domain can still make a move against the people who come to the world domain to use the Tower of Ascension. The world domain is vast, and the natives of the four great clans require a large number of people to gather resources. They cannot directly force the people who come here to work for them, but by offering people a contract that can allow them to stay here for an extended period of time, they can order these people to force other people to sign contracts with them. Honestly speaking, Evan was actually quite confused after using the soul search skill, because there were many things that he did not understand due to the low intelligence of Grunk. Due to Grunk's low intelligence and his low standing in the Warlord Gang, the information Evan received from him was broken. There were many things that he did not understand about the contract, and even the purpose of the four great clans was not clear. Instead of clearing his doubts, the information he received from Grunk actually increased the doubts he had. I need to use the soul search on someone whose position is high among the natives of the four great clans. If I want to get a clear idea about what is happening here, Evan muttered and rubbed his temples. I wonder if that guy Nate is also here in world domain, or if he left for Utopia, Evan said to himself as he landed outside of the city. He left for the Tower of Ascension 6 months before me, so there is a high chance that he might have already used the Tower of Ascension and went to Utopia. Well, it doesn't matter what happened to that guy. As long as he doesn't appear in front of me again, I couldn't care less about him, Evan said and finally entered the city. Chapter 644. Evan stopped using the chameleon illusion skill and returned back to his original appearance upon entering the city. He first transferred all the things that were inside Grunk's storage ring into his shadow storage and threw away the ring, so that even if there was a tracking mark on the ring, no one would be able to track him. After dumping everything inside his shadow storage, Evan looked at the things that he received from Grunk while walking in the direction of Malak. The first thing that Evan saw was a small pile of bright green crystals that were filled with world essence. He took out one of the crystals from his shadow storage and looked at it closely. So this is the essence crystal, huh? He muttered as he felt the rich world essence that was inside the crystal. Evan tried to refine the crystal and noticed that he could directly absorb the world essence that was inside the crystal to recover his used up world essence. I can use these crystals to recover my strength during a fight, Evan said to himself and counted the crystals that he got. There are just 326 crystals here, Evan said, and rubbed the back of his head. Although after using the soul search he knew the essence crystals are very rare, he still couldn't help but feel that Grunk was quite a poor bastard. I need to give Malak 200 crystals because I promised him that by the end of the day I would give him double the amount of crystals he paid for the sandwich, Evan said to himself, and smiled warily when he remembered how Malak was crying after paying for the sandwich. Well, I wouldn't have cared about him, but since he tried to help me even when those orcs showed up, I think I can at least do this much. Evan looked at the other things that he got from the storage ring and saw 2 light bule flowers that had 3 petals in them. He focused on the flowers and their details appeared in front of his eyes. Sea Aqua flower, rank 1, a rare flower that can only be found deep within the sea. This flower is filled with a large amount of water element energy and can help people increase their understanding of the conceptual energy of water. The effects of the flower can be enhanced by turning it into a potion. Evan read the details of the flower and raised an eyebrow. Generally speaking, if he wants, he can use this flower himself and try to understand the mysteries of the water element. As long as his understanding of an element reaches a certain degree, he will be able to change his world essence according to his understanding of that element. For example, if he uses the Siaqua flower, and his understanding of water element reaches a certain degree, he would be able to change his conceptual energy between the conceptual energy of void and the conceptual energy of water at will. But if instead of focusing on one type of conceptual energy, if he tries to focus on two energies at the same time, it will become incredibly difficult for him to show the full power of any of the energies, which is why Evan was planning to focus on the conceptual energy of the void for the time being. I can give this flower to Aqua. His affinity with the water element is quite high, so it might be helpful to him, Evan said to himself, but soon he fell into deep thought. Aqua is still an S-ranker, and he doesn't have world essence inside his body, so it will be useless even if I give this flower to him. Evan sighed lightly and shook his head. Guess I will have to wait until I become a rank 1 core evolver and increase the rank of my shadow undeads through the growth link skill before they can use the resources like this flower. Other than Siaqua flowers, there were a few more high-ranking herbs as well, but they were also not useful to Evan for the time being. Amara can study these herbs to increase her knowledge, so that she will be able to make high-level potions for me in the future, Evan said, and threw all the herbs in front of Amara, who was inside his shadow storage. From the storage ring, he got some S-rank weapons as well, but since those weapons were made for Grunk, they were useless to Evan, so he gave them to Necros, Astronauts and the shadow undeads of extreme demons, who were specialized in physical strength. There were a few other things as well, but they were also completely useless. Evan threw them in one of the corners of the shadow storage and stopped looking at them. After a few minutes, Evan arrived at the place where he left Malak. Although it had been nearly 1.5 hours, Malak was still crying. On a closer look, Evan even noticed some meat buns in the bowl that he had left in front of Malak. This guy is really shameless, Evan said when he saw some leftover meat sauce at the corner of Malak's mouth. It was obvious that although he was crying, he still didn't let go of the free food. Isn't this man afraid that if he eats the free food without thinking, he will be scammed once again? Evan thought inwardly and walked towards him. When Malarak heard the sound of footsteps, he started crying even louder and pushed the bowl a little ahead. Evan's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he saw this, and he nearly kicked Malrak for his overacting. It seems you are quite satisfied with this business. Malak's body stiffened when he heard Evan's voice, and he slowly lifted his head. When he lifted his head and saw Evan's disdainful eyes, Malak's face turned red. Cough. He coughed in embarrassment and pulled back the bowl that he had pushed ahead in order to get something from Evan. I was trying to hone my mind by acting lick quote. Don't worry, I understand. Evan stopped Malrak from speaking and threw a storage ring inside his bowl. I won't disturb you anymore. You can continue honing your mind. Malak was stunned when he heard Evan and looked inside the storage ring. When he looked inside and saw 200 essence stones, a shocked look appeared on his face. This quote, Malak looked at Evan and wanted to ask him where he got these essence stones, but he saw that Evan was already walking away. Wait, Malrak shouted and quickly chased after Evan. What? Evan asked while raising an eyebrow when Malak stopped him. Malak took a deep breath after stopping in front of Evan and shook his head. I can't take these essence stones. I don't know where you got these stones from, but I know that earning essence stones here is no easy task. You have just arrived here, so you should just keep them for yourself to buy some resources for yourself, he said, and returned the storage ring back to him. Besides, I am sure you must have robbed someone, and I will only get in trouble if I take them from you. Evan looked at Malrak for a few seconds after hearing him and his lips curved upwards slightly. This guy is not bad. He placed the storage ring back into Malak's hand and started to walk away from there. Oya, I said I do quote. Hey Malak, do you want to see something interesting? Before Malrak could finish speaking, Evan looked back at him and asked with a friendly smile on his face. Seeing the friendly smile on Evan's face, Malak felt a chill run down his spine and remembered how Evan had shown him the exact same smile after offering him the sandwich. This terrorist is once again planning to do something illegal. Malak thought inwardly and turned around to run away from Evan. Chapter 645. The world domain is very big, and it is filled with abundant resources. In reality, although the people of the 4 great clans have been collecting resources around the city for hundreds of years, there are still many places in the area of 100,000 kilometers around the city that are still completely unexplored. Even without the help of people who came to the world domain in order to use the Tower of Ascension, the people of 4 great clans can collect enough resources for themselves, because there is no shortage of resources in the world domain. Moreover, the people of the 4 great clans can't use the Tower of Ascension like normal people and go to Utopia. This is another restriction that the laws of world domain had placed on them. Since the people of the 4 great clans can't go to Utopia, they don't even need to gather too many resources like normal people who are here to collect resources, so that they can sustain themselves after using the Tower of Ascension. Although Evan was curious as to why the people of the 4 great clans were forcing people to sign a contract with them when they didn't really need their help, it was just a simple curiosity. Actually, he is not much interested in it. So then the question is, if Evan has no interest in what the 4 great clans are doing, then why is he not leaving the world domain? Although the people of the 4 great clans are controlling the Tower of Ascension, if he wanted to enter the tower, he is sure that no one would be able to stop him. Then why is he not leaving the world domain and trying to meddle in the affairs of the 4 great clans? The answer to this question is actually quite simple. He wasn't interested in 4 great clans, but he was very interested in the wealth they had collected in the past hundreds of years. In simple words, he is planning to rob them before leaving. What the hell am I doing here? Malak asked with a dazed look on his face, while looking at the giant castle of the Warlord Gang in front of him. You have come here with me to plunder one of the 4 great clans. Malak heard a calm voice, and saw Evan standing right beside him. Right. I was thinking about running away when he asked me if I wanted to see something interesting. But before I could run away, he dragged me here with him, Malak said inwardly, when he finally remembered how he arrived in front of the castle of Warlord Gang. Wait a second. Suddenly Malak's eyes widened in shock, and he asked Evan in a trembling voice, "What do you mean we are here to plunder one of the 4 great clans?" I meant what I just said. We are here to rob these king pigs, Evan said in a nonchalant tone, while scouting the castle of the Warlord Gang, using the Hawk's Eyes skill. You are insane, Malak said in a low voice, and backed away from Evan. If you want to die, then go ahead and die, I won't stop you. But don't drag me with you. Sigh, do you think I am stupid? Since I am here to rob them, I have enough confidence in taking care of them. You just have to follow me, and you will be able to reap a lot of benefits. Evan said while still looking at the castle. Hearing Evan's words, Malak looked at him as if he was looking at a lunatic. He wanted to ask him if he fell out of bed this morning and hit his head, but he was afraid that Evan would beat him, so he took a deep breath and asked in a serious tone, "Since you have enough confidence in robbing them alone, then why are you asking me to follow you? I mean, we don't even know each other, and bringing me along will just reduce the amount of resources you will receive in the end." Evan was stunned when he heard Malak, and a deep frown appeared on his face. He did not think too much about it, because during all this time he was just going with the flow. But now when Malak asked him, he finally realized that he was acting differently than usual. Ever since I arrived here in the world domain, my behavior has been really strange. Usually, I always avoid talking to people and maintain distance from them. But since the moment I came here, Evan said inwardly, and suddenly thought about something. He quickly opened his status window and looked at his title section. And the moment he looked at his title section, his eyes widened in shock. Titles: Rule Breaker, Ruler of the Shadow Realm. It is not here, he said in a stunned voice. The Cursed One title is not here. He looked at the title section a few more times to make sure he was not hallucinating, but the results were the same. What the hell is going on here? I saw my status window just before I entered the world domain, and I still had the Cursed One title at that time. Then why is it not here now? Evan said inwardly, and looked in the direction of the Tower of Ascension. Does the disappearance of my title have something to do with this place? He looked at the giant black tower for a few seconds, and took a deep breath. It seems the change in my behavior is related to the disappearance of this title, Evan said in a low voice, and scratched the back of his head. Is this title gone forever, or has it disappeared only for the time I am in this place? Evan asked himself and hoped that the title disappeared permanently. Are you alright? Evan came back to his senses when he heard Malak's voice, and saw him looking at him with a frown on his face. Don't worry, I am fine, Evan said and waved his hand. Malak looked at him for a few seconds, and felt something was wrong with him, but he did not think too much about it, and asked once again, So, why are you bringing me along with you? Evan glanced at his status window one last time and said after closing it, Because I want to. Huh? Malak showed a confused expression when he heard Evan and looked at him with a questioning look on his face. Evan smiled when he saw Malak's confused expression and patted his shoulder. I said I'm bringing you with me because I want to. Malak looked at Evan with dead eyes when he heard his reply. He wanted to tell him to answer him seriously, but before he could tell him, Who's there? They heard an imposing voice and saw two orcs coming in their direction. Chapter 646. Who's there? Suddenly Evan and Malak heard a threatening voice, and saw two S-rank orcs coming in their direction. Malak's body stiffened when he saw the imposing looks on the orcs' faces. Meanwhile, Evan smirked inwardly, and a nervous look appeared on his face. You two have been standing here for a long time. What are you two planning to do? One of the S-rank orcs asked in a commanding voice after stopping a short distance away from Evan and Malak. Evan adjusted his expressions when he heard the orc and replied in a nervous voice. Sir, we have come here to tell you about something we saw a few hours ago, while gathering some herbs outside of the city. The eyes of both of the S-rank orcs flashed when they heard Evan, and they looked at each other. Did he come across a valuable thing while gathering the herbs, and want to sell us information about it? Both of the orcs thought at the same time. What did you see? One of the S-rank orcs asked in an eager voice. This we saw. Evan hesitated a little and started stuttering. Hurry up and tell us before I throw you into the soul chamber and extract your soul to get the information I want, the orc said in a threatening tone, and locked down his aura on Evan. Evan showed a terrified expression when he heard the orc, and his face turned deathly pale. While we were gathering herbs outside of the city, we saw Sir Grunk fighting against a human. The fight was very intense, but in the end, that human killed Sir Grunk. Evan paused a little after saying this, and spoke in a scared voice after a moment. We were hiding behind a rock and thought we were safe, but after killing Sir Grunk, that human caught us as if he was aware of our presence since the beginning. We thought that man would kill, but after catching us, instead of killing us, he ordered us to come here and deliver a message to the higher authorities of the Warlord Gang. The eyes of both of the orcs widened in shock upon hearing Evan. Even Malak looked at Evan with a look that was asking what the FU*K you are talking about. You are saying Master Grunk is dead? The S-rank orc asked in a shocked voice once his mind finally registered Evan's words. Evan didn't say anything and just nodded his head in a scared manner. Both of the S-rank orcs looked at each other with shock evident on their faces, and started discussing using telepathy skill. I think he is telling the truth, one of the S-rank orcs said after a moment. Earlier I heard that Master Grunk was ambushed by a human, and he chased that human to catch him, but he still hasn't come back yet. Hey, what the hell you are trying to do? While the orcs were discussing among themselves, Malak asked Evan. Hearing Malak, Evan just signaled him to stay quiet. Damn it. I should have escaped from here when I had the chance, Malak cursed inwardly, and gulped down his saliva, seeing the serious look on the faces of the two orcs. You said that human asked you to deliver a message, right? One of the orcs asked after a moment, to which Evan nodded his head. Come with us. We need to report this to our superiors, the S-rank orcs said, and without giving Evan and Malak any chance, they started to drag them inside the castle. Evan showed a nervous expression when the orcs started to drag him inside, but when Malak looked at Evan's face, he felt a chill running down. Why do I feel like these orcs are digging their own graves by bringing this terrorist inside their castle? 5 minutes later, Evan and Malak were standing in a crude-looking stone room. Why do I feel that they are treating us like prisoners, and have brought us here to interrogate us? Malak thought when the orcs left, after bringing them into a stone room. A few minutes later, Evan and Malak heard the sound of heavy footsteps coming in their direction. Bang! With a loud bang, The stone door of the room opened, and a 3 meters tall, brown-colored orc entered the room. A heavy pressure filled the room, and it became difficult for Malrak to breathe. Evan didn't feel much pressure, but he also acted like Malrak, and started to grasp for breath. The rank 1 orc who entered the room, looked at Evan and Malrak with cold eyes, and continued to press down his aura on them. After a few seconds, when the orc felt Evan and Malrak were about to pass out, he finally stopped pressing down his aura on them. "I will only ask once," the orc said in a threatening tone after withdrawing his aura. "Is everything you told earlier true? If you dare lie to me, I will kill both of you instantly." We are telling the truth," Evan said in a horror-filled voice. "After he killed Sir Grunk, he really told us to come here and deliver the message that tonight at 9 o'clock he and his team members will attack the castle of Warlord Gang." Hearing Evan, the orc looked at Evan and Malak's faces for a few seconds and closed his eyes. "I see," the orc said after a moment and turned around to leave. Sir." Seeing the orc was leaving, Evan spoke in a hesitant voice. "What?" the orc asked in a cold voice. Can we go now?" A scary smile appeared on the orc's face when he heard Evan, and he said in a calm voice, "I will let you go once I confirm that you are telling the truth." Malak's body stiffened when he heard the orc, and he asked in a stuttering tone, "And how are you going to confirm it?" The orc opened the stone door of the room and took a step outside. "We just have to wait for the night. Did not you say they are going to attack us? If they attack us, it means that you are telling the truth. But if they don't attack us..." The orc glanced at them and showed all of his sharp teeth. Bang! With a loud bang, the orc closed the door and left from there. Malak looked at Evan and saw he was looking at the door with a dazed look on his face. Seeing the dazed look on Evan's face, Malak gulped down his saliva. "You have a plan, right?" he asked in a hopeful voice. Hearing Malak, Evan looked at him and showed a thumbs up with the same dazed look on his face. When Malrak saw Evan's dazed thumbs up, he nodded his head and tears began to flow from his eyes. "Yup, we are definitely FU*ked. Chapter 647. Why are you crying?" Evan was startled when Malak suddenly started to cry. "I am crying because we are FU*ked up, doomed, finished," Malak said in a dramatic voice, and looked at the stone ceiling of the room with hollow eyes. "There's no way anyone will attack the Warlord Gang tonight. And once they find out you were just messing with them, they will definitely fry us in oil, and enjoy the crispy fried humans." Evan slapped Malak at the back of his head when he heard him and looked at him like he was looking at an idiot. "What the hell are you talking about? Didn't I just give you a thumbs up indicating that everything is okay?" Hearing Evan, Malak stopped crying and looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean by everything is fine? When you showed me thumbs up, your expressions were clearly abnormal and were literally saying we are FU*ked. Evan's mouth twitched uncontrollably when he heard Malak, and he felt like slapping him. "Huh?" he sighed in a low voice and said while looking at the closed stone door. "My expressions were abnormal because I never expected we would be able to enter here so easily. I thought that the higher-ups of the Warlord Gang would be a bit more suspicious of us, and would torture us in order to make us reveal the truth. But these pigs are surprisingly dumb." Evan stood up from the ground and sat down on the stone bench that was inside the room. After sitting down, he looked at Malak and showed him a friendly smile. "Now that we are inside the castle, we just have to wait for the show to begin." Malak gulped down his saliva seeing Evan's friendly smile, and asked in a hesitant voice, "What do you mean by show? Is something going to happen here?" When Evan heard Malak's words, he looked at him in confusion. "Didn't I already tell you what's going to happen here?" Malak raised an eyebrow when he heard Evan, but soon something clicked in his mind, and his eyes widened in shock. "Are you saying someone is really going to attack Warlord Gang tonight?" Evan didn't say anything and just nodded his head. An excited expression appeared on Malak's face when he saw Evan nodding his head, and he also stood up from the ground. "Who is going to attack Warlord Gang? Is it another one of the 4 great clans?" "Don't worry, you will find out soon enough," Evan said in a mysterious voice, and just closed his eyes. Time passed and soon there were only 5 minutes left until 9 o'clock. Although the Warlord Gang did not believe that anyone would dare to attack their stronghold, they were still on high alert, as it had already been confirmed that Grunk was indeed dead. S-rank Ox were patrolling around the castle with serious looks on their piggy faces. and the rank 1 orcs were standing around the castle walls to prevent any kind of accident. There were around 5,000 orcs present in the castle, and among them, 11 of them were of rank 1 core evolvers. In no time, only 1 minute was left, and the tension in the atmosphere reached its peak. Malak was walking back and forth in the stone room, and was looking at Evan from time to time, who was still sitting with his eyes closed. When there were just 3 seconds left, Evan finally opened his eyes and took a deep breath. The moment Evan took a deep breath, Malak's expression changed. The rank 1 orcs who were standing at the castle walls, and the S-rank orcs who were patrolling the area, stopped whatever they were doing, and looked in the southeast direction at the same time. This quote the eyes of Jurok, the rank 1 orc who met with Evan and Malak in the stone room, widened in shock, and he subconsciously took a step back. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Soon, the orcs noticed hundreds of cold purple flames moving in their direction, and the auras of tens of S-rankers filled the surroundings. 10, 100, 500, 1000. In no time, the orcs felt the auras of at least 4,000 different S-rankers, and their hearts started to beat like war drums. Rumble. Just when the orcs were wondering what was happening, the surrounding atmosphere started to tremble, and the entire castle lit up with bright orange light. All the orcs lifted their heads and looked up towards the sky, and the moment they looked at the sky, their faces turned deathly pale, as they saw a huge ball of fire falling down from the sky like a meteorite towards the castle. Just when most of the S-rank orcs thought they were going to die, the protection barrier of the castle activated. Boom. The huge fireball exploded as soon as it came in contact with the barrier. The barrier of the castle trembled violently when the fireball exploded and was engulfed in orange fire. Although some cracks appeared on the barrier because of the powerful impact, all of them quickly disappeared under the self-repair effect of the barrier. Whoosh! Soon the fire that was covering the barrier disappeared, and Asher appeared above it. Swish, 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 dash. After Asher, Albelu, Stony, Snow, Elijah, Volak, Amara, Necros and other shadow undeads also arrived, and now an army of 4,000 shadow undeads was standing in front of the castle. What do you think? Can you break this barrier? Elijah asked Asher. Although it is powerful, I don't think it will be able to last long if we attack together. Then what are we waiting for? Let's just smash this bar quote. I don't think we need to break this barrier. Before Elijah could finish speaking, Asher once again spoke. This type of barrier consumes a great amount of essence stones, so I don't think they will let us attack the barrier freely. If I'm not mistaken, they activated the barrier so that their castle would not be damaged during the battle, and they will most likely fight against us outside the barrier. Just as Asher finished speaking, the barrier disappeared, and all the orcs rushed towards the shadow undeads. The moment all the orcs left the parameters of the castle, the barrier once again appeared around the castle, so that it would not collapse during the fight. These pigs could have survived a little longer if they had stayed inside the barrier, but now that they are quote. Don't be mistaken, Asher once again interrupted Elijah before she could finish speaking. All of these orcs are marked by this barrier, so they can go inside it whenever they want. On the other hand, we can't enter the barrier, so if you injure an orc during the fight, make sure you don't give him any chance to escape inside the barrier. Elijah wanted to beat down Asher for interrupting her 2 times, but before she could say anything, the orcs started their attack like wild beasts. Because of the 11 rank 1 orcs, the shadow undeads were at a complete disadvantage in the fight. But they did not care about it, because their main goal was not to kill the orcs. While the orcs were busy dealing with the shadow undeads, Evan also made his move. Let's go, this is a chance, he said to Malak, and moved towards the closed stone door. Chapter 648. Let's go, we need to finish everything quickly, Evan said, and quickly walked towards the closed stone door, when he heard the sound of fighting. How are we going to leave from here? This entire room is made of reinforced dolomite stones. Even with all our might, we will not be able to put even a scratch. Quote. Bang. Before Malak could finish speaking, Evan punched the stone door. Rumble. A loud booming sound echoed out, and the entire room shook. Malak lost his balance and dropped to the ground, but he didn't care about it, and looked at the stone door with his eyes wide open. Slowly, cracks started to spread all over the door like spider webs, and small chunks of stone started to fall down from it. Malak opened his mouth to say something, but before he could say anything, bang, another booming sound echoed out, and the entire dolomite stone door turned into dust. Let's go. Evan didn't care too much about the stone door and rushed out of the room. Malak looked at the crumbled stone door for a few seconds and shook his head. This guy is a *king monster, he muttered to himself, and quickly followed after him. Rumble, boom, clang. The fight between the orcs and the shadow undeads was in full swing, and the entire castle was shaking. The sounds of explosions and weapons colliding with the weapons were ringing out everywhere, and Evan was continuously using his mana to resummon his shadow undeads in order to maintain their numbers. Where are we going? Malak asked as he followed Evan deeper into the castle. Since we are here to plunder them, we are obviously going to their treasure vault, Evan replied without looking back, and continued to move deeper into the castle. You know the location of their treasure vault? Malak asked in a surprised voice. A close dead friend told me about it, Evan said as he thought about Grunk. Dead friend? Malak raised an eyebrow hearing Evan, but he didn't ask anything. Because most of the orcs were fighting outside, Evan and Malak arrived deep within the castle without any problem. Just when everything was going smoothly, Evan sensed the presence of 2 orcs at the end of the corridor they were walking down. There are 2 S-rank orcs ahead of us, Evan said to Malak, and mana started to move inside his body. Malak's expression turned serious when he heard Evan, and he took out a light green-colored sword from his storage ring. Evan glanced at the sword Malak was holding and smiled lightly. You don't need to do anything, at least for now. What do I quote? Malak wanted to ask him what he meant, but before he could ask him, mana flowed through the energy veins that were inside Evan's feet. Flick a step, he said, and instantly arrived at the end of the corridor. The 2 orcs had already sensed Evan's and Malak's presence, so they were hiding at the left and right side of the corridor in order to ambush them. When Evan suddenly appeared near them, both of them were stunned. Before the orcs could react, Evan slashed in his left and right direction with his hands. The surrounding wind moved along with his hand movements and turned into 2 giant wind blades. Swish! The S-rank orcs didn't even get a chance to understand what happened before their bodies were cut into 2 halves by the wind blades. Evan looked at the sliced bodies of the orcs and saw, similar to Grunk, their bodies also turned into dust after their death. Malak couldn't help but gulp down his saliva and looked at Evan like he was looking at an abomination. It was the first time he had seen Evan taking action against an S-ranker, and seeing how easily he killed both of the S-rank orcs, he could tell that if Evan decided to kill him, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Let's go. Evan didn't think too much about the dead orcs, and said to Malak as he moved towards the treasure vault. 5 minutes later, Evan and Malak stopped in front of a stone wall. It should be here, Evan muttered after stopping and looked at the stone wall carefully. He touched the stones of the wall with a serious look on his face, and after a minute, his eyes lit up. Open, he said, and pressed a hidden stone button. Rumble. The stone wall started to shake the moment Evan pressed the button, and a hidden staircase that was leading to the underground appeared in front of him and Malak. Be careful, there will be a rank 1 core evolver who will be guarding the treasure vault, Evan said to Malak in a serious voice, and both of them entered the hidden passage. Soon both of them reached the end of the staircase, and Malak could feel a powerful aura coming from deep within the underground area. This guy is stronger than Grunk, Evan thought inwardly, when he felt the aura of the person who was guarding the treasure vault. The 2 of them carefully moved deeper into the underground area, and soon saw a sleeping orc sitting on a chair in front of a closed door. Just wait here, Evan said to Malak using telepathy. Once they could see the orc, and took out his Blazabringer gauntlets. I can help you in distracting him, Malak said in a hesitant voice when he heard Evan. Don't worry, it will be over in a single move, so there is no need for you to do anything. Evan wore his gauntlets, and said in a calm voice. Malak wanted to say something when he heard Evan, but after some hesitation, he just nodded his head and didn't say anything. Evan took a deep breath after wearing the gauntlets, and his eyes turned sharp. Mana moved inside his body, and he took a step forward. Flick a step. He instantly arrived in front of the sleeping orc, whose eyes snapped open the moment Evan arrived in front of him. Although Evan moved quite fast, the orc still reacted in time, and tried to counterattack him by using his skill Walkery, that could stun his enemy. But before the orc could use his skill, Evan activated his skill, Soul Severance. Soul Severance. After activating this skill, the user can sever the connection between a person's body and soul for 1 second using their spiritual power, rendering them unconscious or temporarily incapacitated. The eyes of the orc turned hollow, as the connection between his physical body and the soul was cut off by Evan. Because the orc was a rank 1 core evolver, his spiritual power was quite high. Because of his high spiritual power, the connection between his physical body and the soul was cut off only for a split second. But that split second was more than enough for Evan to end the battle. The moment the orc's eyes turned hollow, Evan activated his other skills as well. Power Aura, Wine Manipulation, Sonic Resonance. Other than these, he also activated the skill of his Blazabringer gauntlets, Basilisk's Wrath, and his gauntlets turned into sharp claws. Before the orc could restore the connection between his soul and body, Evan's sharp claw-like hands moved. Rip! A ripping sound echoed out in the underground area. And just by using brute strength, Evan ripped off the head of the rank 1 orc. Thud! A thudding sound rang out, and the giant headless body of the orc dropped to the ground motionless. Malak opened and closed his mouth like a goldfish, and tried to say something, but no words came out of his mouth. Evan also sighed in relief when he noticed the life aura of the orc disappeared, and deactivated all of his skills. He was about to call Malak after killing the orc, but before he could call him, ring, ring, a loud siren rang out throughout the castle of Warlord Gang, and all the orcs looked in the direction of the treasure vault at the same time. Chapter 649. Ring, ring. The moment the siren started to ring out, all the orcs understood that someone had killed the guardian of the treasure vault. Your bastard. Bang. A powerful aura that was on par with Asher suddenly erupted from one of the secluded areas of the castle, and the leader of the Warlord Gang, Mogul, who was at the peak of rank 1, rushed towards the treasure vault. Many of the orcs also stopped fighting against the shadow undeads, and rushed inside the barrier of the castle to catch the intruder. The shadow undeads tried to stop the orcs from going inside the barrier, but because of the rank 1 orcs, they were not able to stop them. Asher was stronger than any other rank 1 evolver of the Warlord Gang, but he was fighting against 5 of them at the same time, so it was impossible for him to help the other shadow undeads. Elijah, Necros, Volak and other powerful shadow undeads were also busy dealing with the remaining rank 1 orcs, so they were also not able to do anything when hundreds of orcs rushed inside the barrier. Damn it, these pigs installed our alarm clock-like siren here. Evan cursed when he heard the loud siren and felt the auras of hundreds of orcs coming in his direction. Before coming here, Evan had planned to silently rob the Warlord Gang without alerting anyone, but the siren just now ruined his plans. I need to get out of here as soon as possible, or it will become dangerous for me once all the rank 1 core evolvers of the Warlord Gang come here, Evan said inwardly, and looked at Malak. But when he looked at Malak, he was stunned because he saw him walking in his direction with a relaxed look on his face. Although the situation looks dangerous, I am sure he has everything under control, so there is no need for me to panic, Malak muttered in a low voice as he walked towards Evan. This stupid guy. When Evan heard Malak's muttering, his face froze, and he felt like slapping him. Although he wanted to tell him that this time they were really fuck-ed, he didn't have time for idle talk. He quickly picked up the storage ring of the rank 1 orc he had just killed and turned around to look at the door of the treasure vault. After the siren started to ring out, a golden barrier that was even more powerful than the barrier that was protecting the castle appeared around the treasure vault. Shadow Clone. Evan used his Shadow Clone skill and created a clone of himself. After creating his clone, he took out a token from the storage ring of the rank 1 orc and handed it to his clone. Go. After giving the token to his clone, Evan ordered it to go inside the treasure vault using the Shadow Walk skill and store all the things that are inside the vault in his shadow storage. Evan's Shadow Clone can use all of his skills, except for his unique and class-specifying skills. The Shadow Walk and Shadow Storage were normal skills, so his clone can use them without any problem. Moreover, Evan had already tested that the space inside the shadow storage of his clone is connected with the space of his shadow storage, so all the things that his clone will store in the space of his shadow storage will automatically appear in the space of his shadow storage. If this place was not guarded by a rank 1 orc, I would have sent my clone directly to loot their vault instead of coming here. Myself, Evan thought to himself, as he watched the clone going inside the golden barrier using the shadow walk skill. The moment his clone passed through the barrier using the shadow walk skill, Evan noticed he had lost 60% of his mana. Damn, this barrier is really powerful. Evan took out a full mana recovery potion and quickly drank it to recover his lost mana. After passing through the barrier, the clone pressed the token that Evan had given it earlier at the center of the door. The moment the clone pressed the token on the door, tens of formation lines that were engraved on the door lit up, and in just a few seconds, clank, a clanking sound rang out, and the door of the treasure vault slowly opened. "Let's go. Our work here is done," Evan quickly said to Malak. Once the door of the treasure vault was opened, and his clone went inside. Hearing Evan, Malak just nodded his head with a relaxed look on his face, and followed after him, without caring about the tens of orcs that were coming towards them. He was still thinking that everything was completely fine. While escaping, Evan used his spiritual power and covered Malak and himself with it, so that no one would be able to find them using their spiritual senses. With his current spiritual power, Evan was sure that he could hide their presence even from the peak rank 1 core evolvers. In just a few seconds, they left the underground area and returned back to the castle. The moment Evan and Malak came out from the underground area, they felt a tyrannical presence rushing in their direction. "Keep your mouth shut and hide your presence." Evan quickly pulled Malak into one of the side hallways and concealed his aura. The relaxed look on Malak's face also disappeared when he felt the powerful bloodthirsty aura that was rushing in their direction, and he also tried his best to hide his presence. Just as Evan and Malak hid in the hallway, an orc that was dark blue in color and was 4 meters tall rushed inside the underground area through the hidden staircase. Behind the blue orc, tens of S rank and 2 rank 1 orcs also rushed inside the underground area. "Let's go," Evan said to Malak once the orcs went into the underground area, and he dashed outside of the castle. While running away, he used his connection with the clone and looked at what it was doing. When Evan saw through the eyes of his clone, his lips curved upwards into a smug smile, because all he saw was an empty treasure room, which means his clone had already stored everything that was inside the treasure vault into his shadow storage. Whoosh! Through his clone, Evan suddenly heard a strange sound and noticed the barrier covering the treasure vault disappeared, and the next second Mogul rushed inside the treasure vault. When Mogul saw the empty treasure vault, his blue face turned red, and his explosive aura covered the entire castle. "You damned thief, how dare you try to rob my things?" An anger-filled voice reverted throughout the castle, and Evan lost his connection with the clone. "Let's quickly get out of here before that pig realizes that the thing that it just killed is a clone, and all of his wealth is already inside my pocket," Evan thought, and increased his running speed. Although Malak was relaxed and was not affected by Mogul's powerful aura because Evan was protecting him, he could also feel the rising tension in the air and increased his running speed. But before Evan could leave the castle, the thing that he was afraid of happened. Roar! An enraged roar reverted throughout the castle, and Evan's and Malak's bodies froze. "You are under the effect of Orc Lord's war cry. F***K. He noticed it earlier than I expected." Evan cursed inwardly and tried to break free from the effect of the Orc Lord's war cry. "Damn bastard, don't think you can escape from here." Our angry voice came from the deep within the underground, and boom! The roof of the castle was blasted open, and Mogul appeared high in the sky from the underground. His spiritual senses once again covered the entire castle area, and this time, since Evan's body was frozen under the influence of the Orc Lord's war cry, he was not able to properly hide his and Malak's position. In just a split second, Mogul found Evan and Malak, who were frozen under the effect of his skill. The moment he saw them, Mogul's eyes turned bloodshot because of anger, and he rushed towards them like a wild beast. Boom! The wall of the castle was blasted away, and Mogul arrived in front of Evan and Malak, who were frozen in the middle of the castle's hallway. The moment Mogul arrived there, Evan also broke free from the effect of his skill. "Hey, let's talk this out." Quote, Evan wanted to avoid a fight if possible, so he tried to talk to Mogul, but before he could finish speaking, Mogul rushed towards him with bloodshot eyes. "Die, you thief!" Mogul shouted and arrived in front of Evan in an instant. His giant hands moved at the speed of light, and he tried to grab Evan's head to crush it like a watermelon. But before he could grab Evan's head, whoosh! Evan disappeared from there along with Malak, who was standing with him. "Come on, man, I am trying to act like a good thief who doesn't want to kill anyone. Mogul suddenly heard Evan's voice coming from behind him after he missed his attack. He turned around and saw Evan standing around 50 meters away from him with an indifferent look on his face. I advise you to keep your hands under control, because if I start using my hands, I'll turn this whole place into an orc graveyard. Chapter 650. I advise you to keep your hands under control, because if I start to use my hands, I will turn this entire place into an orc graveyard. When Mogul heard Evan's words, his whole body started to shake. Ha ha ha! Suddenly he burst into laughter, and his aura became completely chaotic. Turn this place into a graveyard, he roared in a thunderous voice, and released his aura without holding back. Boom! A loud explosion rang out, and the ground around Mogul shattered. The walls of the castle started to shake, and the spiderwebs like cracks appeared on them. Let me see, how are you going to turn this place into a graveyard of orcs? Damn it. If not for that siren, I would have already escaped from here. With all of their wealth, Evan said inwardly, when he felt Mogul's aura, and looked at his shadow undeads, who were still fighting against the orcs outside of the castle barrier. He thought about summoning them beside him, but after a moment of consideration decided against it. If he summoned his shadow undeads, all the orcs who were fighting against them would also follow them, and the situation will just become more dangerous for him. He couldn't even escape using the soul beacon skill, because the castle barrier had sealed off the entire space around the castle. Evan was not surprised after knowing that the barrier of the castle could seal the space, because he had already expected something like this. If the barrier couldn't seal the space, anyone who could use the space element could enter the barrier without much problem. Soon, other orcs who followed Mogul to the underground area of the castle also arrived and surrounded Evan and Malak. Now, other than Mogul, there were nearly 100 S rank and 2 rank 1 orcs as well. Why are you just standing there? Didn't you say you will turn this place into a graveyard of orcs? Mogul once again said after the orcs surrounded Evan and Malak. Don't tell me you were just boasting, you lowly thief. Hey, he is mocking you, Malak whispered in Evan's ears when he heard Mogul. Why don't you just go ahead and kill them all like you killed that rank 1 orc in the underground area? Evan's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard Malak. He wanted to tell him that the current situation was a lot different from their situation in the underground area, and his skill Soul Severance was also on cooldown. But looking at Malak's oddly calm expressions, he did not bother to tell him. Looking at the situation, there is no way I can get out of here just by talking, Evan thought inwardly and looked at Mogul. Since I can't get out of here by talking, I just need to show them what will happen if they try to fight against me. Suddenly Evan looked in the direction of the S-rank orcs and activated the mind suppression skill using around 50% of spiritual energy. The moment he used the mind suppression skill, his eyes flashed with bright spiritual power, and the next second, bang, 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 heads of 8 of the S-rank orcs exploded like watermelons. Thud, thud. The sound of headless bodies dropping to the ground rang out inside the castle hallway, and all the orcs subconsciously took a step back. The atmosphere turned completely silent as the orcs watched the bodies of 8 S-rank orcs turn into dust. Since you want me to turn this place into a graveyard, I will fulfill your wish. Amid the silence, Evan's cold voice rang out, and the orcs saw him standing at the same place with an indifferent look on his face. Looking at Evan's indifferent look, all the orcs felt a chill running down their spines and gulped down their saliva. That was definitely a spiritual skill, but how can an S-ranker have such a powerful spiritual energy? Mogul thought inwardly with a shocked look on his face. Even though he was at the peak of rank 1, he was sure that even he could not kill 8 S-rankers just by using his spiritual power like this. While the orcs were still in a dazed state, Evan took a step forward and appeared behind the group of 10 S-rank orcs. Evan's speed was so fast that the S-rank orcs were not even able to see him when he appeared right behind them. Although the S-rank orcs were not able to see Evan, Mogul and the other 2 rank 1 orcs immediately reacted when Evan moved. Seeing Evan was about to kill the S-rank orcs, all 3 of them bolted in his direction with murderous looks on their faces. When Evan saw Mogul and other rank 1 orcs coming towards him, his lips curved upwards into a cold smile. The moment Mogul and the rank 1 orcs arrived near him, the conceptual energy of void that was inside his body moved, A dark purple energy covered his palm, and he clenched his fist. "Void break," he said in a low voice, and the instincts of Mogul and others started to scream. Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, spider webs like cracks started to spread on the space around Evan, and the next second, cracked. The space around him shattered like fragile glass, and a 2 meters wide space rift appeared there. The 10s rank orcs didn't even get a chance to scream before they were pulled inside the void rift and disappeared from the world. Damn it, Mogul and the 2 rank 1 orcs were shocked when the void rift suddenly appeared there, and immediately tried to back away from it. But how could Evan let them escape so easily? Before Mogul and the others could escape from the range of the void rift, he used the wind manipulation skill, and created some strong gusts of wind to push Mogul and others inside the void rift. Ugh, because of the suction force of the void rift, one of the rank 1 orcs wasn't able to handle the gusts of wind, and was swallowed inside the void. "You bastards!" Seeing one of the rank 1 orc was swallowed by the void, Mogul roared in anger, and used all of his power to back away from the void rift along with the remaining rank 1 orc. Using all of his strength, Mogul successfully escaped from the range of the void rift along with the rank 1 orc. "I thought I would be able to kill both of the rank 1 orcs, but this guy is a lot stronger than I thought," Evan thought, when Mogul successfully escaped from there. Soon Evan ran out of the conceptual energy of void, and the void rift closed. After backing away, Mogul didn't dare to attack Evan recklessly, and looked at him with a serious look on his face. In just 2 moves, Evan had killed 18 of the S-rank orcs, and 1 rank 1 orc, which was not normal at all. "If you still want to fight, I am more than happy to play with you," Evan said once the void rift closed, and he saw Mogul was looking at him. "But keep in mind that if you decide to continue, this place will really turn into a graveyard." This is the end of this video. Thank you guys for listening. If any major reading errors occurred, please let me know. Hope you enjoyed and wish you wonderful rest of the day. The Silent Rupt is out.